Why, hello there, everyone. If you have been watching any of my live streams from this past week, then you'll know that I have been playing at least a little bit of Metroid Dread. I have played the game and beaten the game, and then I did a 100% playthrough, and now I have started to speedrun the game. And not only have I been doing this, but fellow streamer whom I have collabed with before, Geo the Hero, has also beaten the game, and you also got 100% completion, and you've even dabbled a little bit in the speedrunning of the game. Isn't that right, Geo?
That is correct. I don't consider myself a speedrunner, but I've definitely tried to beat it as fast as possible.
Yeah, okay. Literally, the only thing you're lacking is just splits on the screen. I should just download some of your VOD and then just put a split overlay on top of it, and then no one will know the difference.
Superimpose your own timer onto my video.
With, like, horribly named splits.
Oh my god. That'd be hilarious.
So, this is going to be a spoiler discussion. I want to get into the story of the game quite a bit. But first, before we get to the story and stuff like that, we could just talk about our general impressions of the game. Kind of like a review, right? Both of us have actually, like, even though we've both been enjoying the game quite a bit, we would both probably agree that we were both kind of mixed on it at the start, right?
The first playthrough was definitely the most mixed, and then a lot of that stuff fell off to the wayside once I played it again.
I'm really glad there was someone else that was mixed on the game too, right? Because it seemed like everyone was just loving the game, like 100% loving the game and everything about it at the start. So they were kind of gaslighting me into thinking I was crazy or something for being so mixed on it at the start.
Yeah.
And I am going to be critiquing the game here in this video, but I just want to let everybody know right now before I start critiquing the game that I do agree that it is a must play, right? If you own a Switch, then you pretty much if you own a Switch, then it's a must play, right? Like this would go alongside, you know, like the Mario Odyssey, the Breath of the Wild, the Smash Bros as a must play AAA Nintendo game, right? Would you agree with that? Yeah,
absolutely.
So
and if you like Metroidvanias, this is definitely one that you need
to play. And the thing is, if you like Metroid, or if you like Metroidvanias, or even if you just like 2D games, like this is already a must play. I think anybody that wants to get the game is going to buy it, and anybody that's not into that kind of game just won't buy it, right? So I'm not interested at all in trying to convince people. I'm not interested at all in influencing people's purchasing behavior, right? Mm-hmm. If anything, I want the game to sell well, right? Because regardless of what I think about the game, regardless of my critiques about the game, we haven't gotten a Metroid game in so long. This is Metroid 5, even though it's marketed as Metroid Dread. It is Metroid 5, and it's been 19 years since Metroid 4 Fusion. Right?
Yeah,
Fusion came out in 2002.
So. That long ago? Oh my God.
Yeah, so 19 years between 4 and 5. And if you're just including like Metroid games in general and you're counting Other M, how long ago was Other M? That was also a while ago.
Other M was released 2010.
Yeah, okay, so over a decade for the last Metroid game in general, and it was 19 years since the last mainline entry.
Well, we also got Samus Returns in 2017.
I'm not counting that because it was just a remake, you know.
But it was a pretty expansive remake.
And I don't think many people played it because, like, the thing is, I don't know how well that game sold, but if it didn't sell well, it definitely has an excuse because it came out on the 3DS at the tail end of its lifespan. I think once the Switch was already out and no one wanted to go play their 3DS when they had a Switch, right?
That's pretty fair, honestly.
Yeah, and it was a remake, and it wasn't even first-party Nintendo. You know, it was outsourced to some dev that is most known for their Castlevania Lords of Shadow games, which I am not a fan of at all. So,
well, isn't it the same dev for Samus Returns, the same one for Dread?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, what I mean is, though, now they have a track record.
Right.
Okay, so when they announced that Samus Returns was being made by Mercury Steam, suspicion was merited, right?
Gotcha.
Yes. Now, when you hear that the team that made Samus Returns is making Dread, that makes a lot more sense because it means they already have a Metroid experience, right?
Yep.
What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, I was saying how I hope the game sells well, right? And I think it is, because I keep seeing these articles about how well it's selling and how it's boosting sales of all the other games in the franchise, which is funny because Nintendo is probably missing out on so much free money by them not putting Zero Mission or Fusion on the Switch.
Yeah, that would be nice to be able to have that, but they're probably holding out for putting Game Boy Advance games on Nintendo Online.
2 years from now, they'll put 4 GBA games on Nintendo Online and jack it up to $100 a month. I can't wait. Thank you, Nintendo.
We're not worthy.
Like literally, Metroid game sales on every kind of eShop spiked since Dread has released, including the Metroid games on Wii U. You can get Fusion on Wii U. I think you can get Zero Mission as well. And also the games on 3DS eShop. So people are literally going out of their way to play these old consoles. They're turning on and dusting off these old consoles to spend money to play these old Metroid games. So my point is, imagine how much more people would be buying those things if it was on a modern console, right?
Yeah, it'd be way more accessible.
Because I don't think many casuals would go turn on their Wii U if they even own a Wii U at all. They probably don't, right? The Wii U didn't even sell well. Just to buy, some GBA game on a Wii U. So yeah. Anyways, just had to call out Nintendo there at the start. But the game is selling well, which is nice, right?
Yeah.
I kind of want to get back to that topic later, talking about more meta stuff. But first, let's just talk about what we think of the game. So I'm going to start talking about my critiques with the game. I'm going to talk about what I like about the game, too. The thing is, keep in mind, guys, anybody listening, if I spend more time talking about the critiques than the positives, that does not mean that I think the game is more bad than good. It just means that it takes longer to articulate the critiques than something that's good, right? Because, obviously the game looks great. The game sounds great, It takes not very much time at all to explain that. I just said it. Anybody with eyes can see the game looks great. Anybody with ears can see that the game sounds great, right? So when I'm talking about critiques, it's much more nuanced stuff that takes longer to explain. So with that disclaimer out of the way, immediately upon starting the game, I was put off. I was immediately put off from the game because of the amount of... I know I've already explained this to you, Gio, but of course I have to bring it up again, for this video.
Yeah, go for it.
I was immediately put off with the amount of tutorials that you're bombarded with, especially because they just hit you with these big text blocks. They just immediately hit you with these big text blocks in the bottom of the screen. And then Adam kind of patronizes you on a lot of stuff as well. And in my opinion, this is completely contrary to one of the best aspects about the Metroid franchise. Taking Super Metroid, for example, just because I think Super Metroid is the most definitive game in the franchise. Super Metroid is a masterclass of game design in that it teaches the player so many things without the player feeling as if they're being taught. There is no actual tutorial in the game. There is no text tutorial at all in the game. Everything that the game teaches you is taught to you because of intuitive game design, or for example, when that ostrich-looking thing teaches you how to shine spark. You know which part I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah, when you fall down and then you have to figure out how to get back up.
Yeah, there's literally no way else to get out, right? And then you see the ostrich run across and then crouch and then jump up. That's way more rewarding and way more fulfilling and way more immersive than just being bombarded with text on the screen, right? I'm really surprised that I haven't heard anyone else critique this as much as me, right? I guess it's because maybe it's not as big of a deal now because everyone knows how to play Metroid now, So, you can only be taught how to shine spark once, So, if you already know how to shine spark from Super Metroid, for example, you're not going to care how you learn about it in Dread if you already know how to do it, right? So I'm thinking maybe that's why there aren't many people complaining about that aspect,
Yeah.
But if I put myself in the shoes of someone playing a Metroid game for the first time, I don't think they are going to be as impressed with Dread as I was when I played Super Metroid for the first time, for example, right? Because when I was playing Super Metroid for the first time, that was one of the things that made it so memorable and remarkable. But someone playing Dread for as their first Metroid game in 2021, as soon as they start playing it, they might not see what makes the franchise so good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Second of all, I know you have a critique that's related to this, but it's a little different, and that's the auto saves. You were critiquing how the Emmys, the Emmys are probably going to be the most divisive aspect about this game for one reason or another, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So we both are kind of mixed on the Emmys, but for different reasons. But I think the more you think about it, we actually would agree on the reason. So what was it you said about the Emmys? You said that them just killing you, like doing a one-hit kill, breaks immersion, because I'm assuming it's because you're respawning a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's other games that, especially in the series, that fulfill the same function as far as like making you feel tension for being chased.
Yeah, they're obviously trying to kind of recapture the essence of the SAX or the SAX from Fusion, right? I'm thinking they were also. I know Dread, as a concept, has actually been in development for a really long time, right? The reason it didn't come out until recently was because, according to them, they said that the AI wasn't up to par until recently. I'm assuming it's because of the Emmy AI, right?
I guess so. I haven't heard that explanation, but that sounds accurate.
I'm assuming that they were also taking some kind of inspiration from things like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, right? If you're trying to look at other examples in games of being hunted by things, because I'm assuming they were trying to go for some kind of horror element, right? Because there's an inherent horror aspect to being hunted by something predatorial, right?
Yes.
Something very primal about that, right? I agree with you that getting killed by the Emmys is immersion breaking. However, I do not critique the fact that they kill you in one hit. I completely hate the autosaves because it completely destroys any kind of suspense or horror that the Emmys could have otherwise had. Because when an Emmy kills you, you respawn right outside of the door to the Emmy zone. So why should I be scared about getting caught by one? Like, what's funny is in a speedrun, it's the time loss that's scary, right? So I'll get to that. I'll get to that later when we talk about speedruns. So I'm just talking about casual playthrough right now, right? In a casual playthrough, I was so disappointed by the Emmys because I wasn't scared of them at all because I was like, yeah, whatever, kill me so I can just retry it. So I found myself brute forcing my way through a lot of these Emmy zones because each time you would respawn, I don't know exactly how the Emmy pathing works yet. I haven't played the game enough, but when it would kill me and I would respawn and I would go back in, it would be in a different spot, you know? So it just felt like I just kept rolling the die, and eventually I was able to just brute force my way through the Emmy zone, and I was able to make it through without it touching me. You know what I mean? I think
it is RNG based, yeah.
Really? You could have definitely balanced. So, like, I bet a lot of people would strawman my argument by saying, without the autosaves, the Emmys would be OP, and then it would frustrate casual players, right? I think you could still balance the game around not having autosaves if you just make the Emmys easier to parry.
It's like 2 frames of animation, I think.
Yeah, the timing. So the issue with the Emmy parries, it's not that it's a small parry window. It's that the time of their attacks actually has some random variance to it. Sometimes when they grab you, they immediately skewer you. Other times they just stare at you for a while and then do it later, like they're trying to fake you out. There's totally some kind of like random variance, right? And you cannot parry these things on reaction. You have to actually, just get lucky or be psychic.
Anticipate it. It's crazy.
Yeah, so, if they always did the same timing when they cut you, you would eventually be able to develop a sense of timing for it, right? And then that would have been like a more rewarding thing. I think the reason they didn't do that is because they know that once you sort of learn the timing, it won't be scary anymore. So they specifically wanted to have variation, right? They should have just made the attacks reactable or something. Like, make it somewhat reactable. And then in that case, you could get rid of the autosaves, right? So if you were to just balance the game around manual saves and you make the Emmys easier to parry, I think that would preserve the sense of horror and suspense that they were wanting. Because then in that case, even if you're not getting caught by the Emmys as much, it would still be scary because then it would be happening less,
Yeah.
Like, if I'm brute forcing my way through an Emmy room and I just got caught 5 times in a row and I'm just trying it again, I'm not scared of getting caught, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But if I got caught, once before and it killed me, that means I'm going to... I think with horror, like, you have to let people sort of build things in their head, right?
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
if the Emmys, either caught you less or were just easier to parry, but you had the fear of knowing that if it killed you, you would go all the way back to the manual save, I think that would have been a much more accurate... I think that would have been a much more accurate execution of what I think they were going for.
Yeah. The thing is, I think what they were going for is not what I would have wanted, but I think that that's fine for some people. Because, like, I've gotten into other discussions with other people about this, and they were like, oh, what? You didn't feel tension with the Emmys? I'm like, no,
I didn't.
I didn't.
I don't
really
know
feel
if
it.
I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but in order for me to be scared in a game, there has to be stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And in a game, the stakes have to be, oh no, lost progress. How else are you going to make stakes, unless you hook me up to some kind of VR, like, electrocution machine that makes me feel pain.
Yeah.
To create any kind of suspense, you have to have stakes. And there are literally no stakes in that game when you're getting chased by an Emmy. Because, like I said, you just respawn right outside of the door. Related to this is another reason I don't like the autosaves. Because the whole game is balanced around the autosaves, it makes the manual save placement feel extremely arbitrary. For example, this really put me off for the first time I beat Kraid, because the first time I beat Kraid, I actually managed to beat him without ever parrying his melee attack, right?
Okay.
So after beating him, I felt like I missed out on part of the game, right? So I wanted to load... So I beat Kraid, and I wanted to load the checkpoint so I could fight him again, because I wanted to see part of the fight that I had missed by not doing a parry, right? Okay. So, you know how he's in the lava?
Mm-hmm.
So right after I beat him, I jumped in the lava, so that way I would die and respawn and presumably fight him again. Okay. Right? Because I wanted to redo the fight. There's a limitless amount of reasons why someone would want to replay a fight like that, right? It shouldn't matter why they want to. If they want to replay a fight and they didn't manually save, they should be able to replay it, right? So I jumped in the lava to respawn, and guess what? When it loaded and respawned me, it had made a checkpoint after beating Kraid. Like, literally, all I did was beat Kraid, and then I jumped in the lava. But it had made an autosave after I beat Kraid. So in order for me to replay him, I would have to load a manual save. The issue is that because the game is balanced around autosaves, that last manual save was so far away from Kraid. Whereas normally in Metroid games, when they're balanced around manual saves, they usually put a save point right beside a big boss fight like that, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up deciding not doing a manual save load because I didn't want to have to go all that way back to Kraid. So I just decided to move on, and then I never saw that part of Kraid. I never got to see that part of Kraid's fight because the autosave essentially screwed me over. And once I knew that the game autosaved after beating a boss, that's another thing that just completely destroyed any kind of suspense. Because I like it in games where after you complete, a big thing like, beating a boss, you have to very carefully go back and find a save point to make sure you don't die afterwards. I'm sure, they probably didn't want people to be, frustrated if they died after doing something big like that. But my point is that they could have balanced the game around manual saves without it seeming really frustrating. Because if you balance the game around manual saves, you would have to be more thoughtful about where you put them, right? And you could put them in front of, big things. You could have a manual save room in front of a big significant boss, and you could make it where after you beat that boss, there was a shortcut back to the save room that you can go to easily or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, did it seem like I was missing anything there? Am I overlooking something big? Because, it's possible I'm just overlooking things in the game, right?
I don't think that you're really overlooking anything. I think that's just a preference that you have that the game doesn't accommodate. And that's fine to an extent. I don't recall where the save is in relation to Kraid, but like I would believe you because the game does
I mean,
put such
now that
dependence on the checkpoints.
yeah, now
I
that we've
100% agree.
now that we've been speedrunning the game, obviously it doesn't feel like it would be that far away now. But in a first playthrough and a casual playthrough, it felt like it was really far away. And it's because, like you just said, they balanced the game around the autosave. So, yeah, if you were to just remove all of the autosaves from the game as is, that would be pretty punishing, right? I'm saying that at a fundamental level, they should have designed the game around having no autosaves. You know what I mean? Because I could definitely see people trying to strawman me by saying, like, Tanuki, if you were to take out all the autosaves with the game as is, you know, it would be so punishing. Stuff like that, you know. All the autosaves eventually kind of forced me to think about the game more like an action platformer than a Metroidvania.
It felt like they wanted to punish you more than they wanted to challenge you at times because of that. Like because the checkpoints were so prevalent, it's just like, oh, we'll make the game as hard as we can so that it doesn't matter if you die. Like we want you to die so that you can overcome it and you'll get this sense of accomplishment. But it's like, no,
and that's kind of why it ended up feeling more like an action platformer to me, because once I started thinking of it like that, I liked the game more because I wasn't expecting it to be like a Metroid game. Okay. Because, you know, like the main things about Metroid to me are, you know, atmosphere, you know, like atmospheric immersion. And like I already said, the immersion gets destroyed with the autosaves, and the enemies one-hit killing you and just respawning right outside the door. I think even like with Super Metroid, there was always an element of horror, right? Like a feeling of isolation on this planet, you know, surrounded by all these aliens and stuff.
For sure, yeah.
I don't know about you, but the sound effect when you get hit in Super Metroid, like, even now, hearing it, when I watch other people play Super Metroid, when they get hit and it makes that sound effect, it makes it gives me a mini heart attack. You know what sound I'm talking about? It sounds like a surprise sound effect almost, you know, like it sounds like some sort of weird, like, inhale or gasp or something.
Yeah, something like that.
So anyways, my point is, I think the game has always actually had a horror element to it. So the main things about Metroid, at least what I consider to be the main things about Metroid, are like atmosphere, immersion, and horror, right? And it didn't have... You could argue that Dread is atmospheric. I would argue it's not as atmospheric as something like Super Metroid. I think they were going for more like a Metroid Fusion thing, where it's like a lot of artificial structures and stuff instead of being in nature, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I don't really consider that part a critique, but when it comes to immersion and horror, like, it didn't have that. So once I started thinking of the game more like an action platformer, I actually started liking it more. As a game, I would give it like an 8 out of 10, which is very good, right? As a Metroid game, I think it's just because I hold it to a higher standard, but as a Metroid game, I would not rate it very highly. But just as a video game, as a product, I would give it like a good like 8 out of 10 or something like that, you know? Right. And then the last critique of mine, well, okay, actually, there's 2 more. What do you think about the controls?
The controls, I think, are great until you start adding the Aeon abilities, and then it's just like, I feel like we're using too much of this controller. It's like, I don't think it's a matter of using too much of the controller. I think it's a matter of just not using the controller real estate well. So I know this is something you can agree with. Specifically the flash shift Aeon ability. Why is it on A if the shoot button is on Y? Yeah, I mean, I've gotten used to it, but it just, like you've said, it reminds me of Mega Man X, where I always change the dash button from A to L.
It makes me think that whoever decided to put flash shift on A played Mega Man X without putting the dash button on R. What kind of sicko does that?
At the same time, though, it's hard for me to like figure out what you would remove from the shoulder buttons to make that happen. Like, I guess the grapple, like,
I think it's weird that the grapple has its own dedicated button. So before we move on, I just want to point out that for anyone that hasn't played the game, with flash shift being on A and the shoot button being on Y, the issue with that is that lots of times you would want to start preemptively charging a beam shot by holding down Y. So now with flash shift being on A, you cannot realistically. You could probably do some kind of weird claw method, which would be extremely uncomfortable. But realistically, you cannot flash shift while holding a charge. Right?
I do it without doing the claw method, but it's
how
just weird.
How do you hold Y and press A?
I've just been doing it, like especially during the Chozo fights is when I end up doing it. And I'm like, how am I doing
okay,
this?
maybe you need to record like controller footage. I'm curious how you're doing that. Either way, unless you're some kind of freak like Geo that has like an extra finger or something, it's pretty hard to do.
We could solve this. What controller are you using? Are you using the Joy-Cons or a Pro controller?
I was using 8BitDo SN30 Pro Plus.
Okay. So I was using the Joy-Cons where the buttons are smaller, so maybe that makes it easier for me.
Maybe it's easier to like fat finger it on a Joy-Con. Yeah. Man, that's not worth the trade-off of the Joy-Con analog stick though, which would lead me to my other complaint about the controls. It's a 2D game, but you have to use the analog stick to move around. And I realize this is probably because of the free 360-degree aiming that you have. You obviously have to have an analog stick to aim if you have 360-degree aiming like that, right?
Yeah.
I think they could have definitely made an alternate control scheme or something, though, where you use the right stick to aim and you can move with the D-pad, because the right stick is used for nothing in the whole game.
Right. You just click it to go invisible, but that's it.
Yeah. Like the actual like movement of the analog stick is never used, which is weird.
Not at all.
Because you could have definitely made a control scheme where you move with the D-pad, but you aim with the right stick. I don't know about other people, but I always play 2D games with a D-pad, right? Eventually, I kind of got used to playing with the analog stick, but once you start doing some of those harder speedrun tricks, having to use an analog stick to do some of those extremely tight technical sequences is not fun. Because, like, for example, like if you need to crouch or something real fast, you don't have the same kind of tactile feedback with an analog stick, so you don't know exactly how far down you have to push the stick to get a crouch, right? Yeah. And then you have to like let it travel back. Whereas, with a D-pad, if you tap down once, no matter how briefly you tapped down, it read a down input. You know what I mean? So that's just why using a D-pad for side-scroller games is just way more precise, right? Because
of the aiming, honestly, they should have options, but if they were going to pick a default control scheme, I guess the one that they chose is probably the best.
But does that mean that they're assuming most people play 2D games with an analog stick? Is that even true?
No, I think it's just that's the accommodation they had to make for the free aiming. And honestly, the more that I play it, like if I'm just like running forward down a hallway, like I will do those like micro adjustments with the 360-degree aiming to like shoot things on the wall or slightly above where I'm facing forward, and it helps a lot. But like for a first playthrough, I could see people being like, I want to use my D-pad.
Like, I'm thinking maybe, most casuals, if they haven't played games since like maybe if they don't play a lot of old games, maybe they don't care. But I remember when I was playing Crash 4, someone was making fun of me for using the analog stick instead of the D-pad. And I was explaining how, 3D games, I use the analog stick, and 2D games, I use the D-pad. So, but there were several people watching me when I was playing Crash 4 who said they use D-pad for both. So that makes me think, obviously that's anecdotal, right? But that makes me think, like, if there are people that use D-pads for 3D games, like for 3D platformers, then that means that they use a D-pad for 2D games, because it wouldn't be the other way around. So I had always assumed that most people always defaulted to using a D-pad in a 2D game, because it just makes more sense, right? Because like an analog stick, there's an inherent three-dimensional aspect about an analog stick, right? Whereas if you're playing a 2D game in a 2D plane, a D-pad is much more representative of the movement, right? Because a D-pad doesn't have, the depth that an analog stick would have. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was a really strange decision on the game developer's part, It
carried over from Samus Returns also, so that's why made the decision.
Are you saying you could not use the D-pad in Samus Returns for movement?
No, you cannot.
On a 3DS, you couldn't use the D-pad to move around.
It's the same decisions carried over from that game to this one.
Wow. Yeah, because I didn't play Samus Returns, so I didn't know about that. Wow. I can't believe I didn't know about that. Why were people not complaining about that? I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. I'm just a weird guy who likes playing 2D games with a D-pad. Crazy, I know. What's weird, though, is that the game itself actually does feel really nice.
Yeah. Even with using the joystick and you're not, used to it at
it's
first.
kind of a mixed bag, because the actual control scheme itself is not good, but the actual act of moving around in the environment is fun.
Especially the better you get at it, it's really fun.
Yeah. The thing is, we were both pretty mixed on the game at the start, right? But both of us have actually started to like the game a lot more as we've spent more time in it. And I think it's mostly because, at least with me, my critiques of the game are kind of obsolete when it comes to speedrunning the game, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're speedrunning a game, immersion doesn't matter, If you're speedrunning a game, the threat, the things that are at stake are time losses, right? So if an enemy kills you in a speedrun, that is scary, because then that's a time loss, whether it's an autosave or not.
Right.
And then also, in a speedrun, you're skipping all the cutscenes and dialogue. You're just mashing through it. So it doesn't matter if those are annoying tutorials, because you're just skipping everything anyway. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And my next critique is the story, and that would also not matter at all in a speedrun, because, like I said, you're skipping all the cutscenes, so who cares?
Right.
Again, if anybody forgot, I do think the game has a lot of good going for it. Like I said, I would give the game, as a video game, not as a Metroid game, but just as a video game, as a product, I would give it an 8 out of 10, because, the game does feel really fun to play. If you think about it more like an action platformer, it's just a really fun game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
my thoughts are a little bit different than yours, but they're similar.
On what?
On each point, there's minor little differences. So, for the Emmys, I know that you mentioned before that I thought that dying to the Emmys breaks immersion, but, my way to fix that would just be have the Emmys do a ton of damage, just, a metric ton of damage.
I think that would be cool.
That would create the tension.
The SAX did that, right?
SAX did that. If you think about Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 does that. I was just playing Zero Mission today, and at the end of Zero Mission, there's a whole section of space pirates chasing you, and they all do a ton of damage.
Yeah, and maybe that would make it feel more like it's part of the same environment that the rest of the enemies are in, Because if it just makes the screen fade to black when it kills you, that kind of does make it seem more like a gimmick than an actual enemy that hurts you. I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I was playing, and for the checkpoint thing, I played Super Metroid again a couple days ago, just out of curiosity for how it played, because I haven't played it in years. And to what you were saying before, seeking out those save points before dying, yeah, that's some tension that you don't feel at all.
Yeah, because in every Metroid game, it's always, some games kind of break the rule a little bit, like Metroid Prime 3, for example. But most Metroid games always have this sense of isolation, right? Samus is supposed to be like a one versus many type of character archetype, or like a man versus nature kind of archetype, right? I actually think that you could probably, now that I'm thinking about it, you could think of Samus as a man versus nature, and a man versus the universe type thing as well. With Samus's backstory, how the Chozo were kind of trying to prepare her for getting revenge on Ridley, right? And trying to fill her head with all these ideas about destiny and stuff. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you're having to hunt out and seek out these save points and stuff really makes it feel like you're on your own, right? And you're just out by yourself, either alone and isolated, or just in a place with a bunch of space pirates and stuff.
Yeah. But when you're speedrunning, honestly, the checkpoints are kind of nice.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Like, the thing is, if you're reviewing this as a speedrun game, it's a completely different beast, which is why, like, I keep alluding to me talking about speedruns, but I'm not actually talking about speedruns yet.
Right.
Like,
the only other thing that I'll add is with the atmosphere. I definitely think it's got a Metroid atmosphere.
you know what's really cool? I don't know if I'm just imagining it, right? But in Artaria, in the first area in the game, there is actually a little motif in that area's soundtrack that sounds exactly like a part from Metroid Prime.
I've heard that somewhere in the soundtrack. I
Yeah,
didn't know it was there.
I thought that was really cool. Like, as soon as I heard that, it made me think of Metroid Prime, and I'm pretty sure it's literally just like a motif ripped straight from Chozo Ruins or something.
It's like they want to acknowledge Metroid Prime, but they don't want to 100% say it's canon.
It makes sense that the mainline series in Prime would be somewhat separated. So, like,
Yeah.
I would expect to hear motifs and stuff in Prime 4 when that comes out, but I was not expecting any kind of nod to Prime at all in Metroid Dread. So I kind of liked that.
I don't know if I heard the motif, but I know that I've heard like an instrument or some sort of sound from like.
It's like the diddle-diddle, diddle-diddle, diddle-diddle. I can't recreate it with my mouth, obviously.
That's very familiar to Prime for sure.
Yeah, it was just the Prime soundtrack has a lot of weird like textures and weird like pseudo environmental sounds that just sort of pop up in the soundtrack.
Yeah,
it was like one of those. It wasn't like an actual melody or anything. It was just like a random like sound sample, whatever you would call it. I really liked how Berenia looked. Like, when I first got to Berenia, that's probably my favorite part in the game in Dread.
Berenia stands out, and the later areas I feel like stand out more than the beginning areas.
You mean like Ferenia, like the Chozo places? Like the artificial structures?
Like the regal looking fancy buildings.
I think what I do like about that is, even though I don't like that as much as, like the environments from Super Metroid, for example, I think that it gives this game its own unique identity, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wouldn't want it to just be like an inferior version of places in prior games. I'm kind of glad that it has its own thing going for it, right? Because Super Metroid, obviously, the whole game takes place under the surface of this planet, so it's like almost all organic structures. And then Fusion is all on that satellite thing. So in Fusion, it's all man-made structures, right?
Right.
And then in Fusion, and then in Dread, it's like a lot of Chozo-made structure, which has its own sort of flavor to it.
Which is a huge thing in the game, like just focusing on the Chozo. Which
yeah. Okay. I could segue that into talking about the story now. Is there anything else about the game, like as a product for like a casual player or a first playthrough, you want to mention before I talk about the story?
Just overall, I feel like the atmosphere, while it's not as much like a Prime or a Super Metroid with the atmosphere all the time, because there's like always this element of go, like action oriented, but I think that carries over from, say, like Zero Mission. Like Zero Mission had that energy where it was always just like, you have to go, it's like all action focused, and the soundtrack really carried over with that as well. So
I'd also like to say
there's a distinct difference between atmosphere-focused Metroid and action-oriented Metroid.
I'd also like to say that
hybrid.
Yeah, I'd like to say that Samus is actually animated extremely well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, what's funny is, like, I don't think anybody would want to admit it, but I think a lot of the action-y stuff in Dread was actually sort of, at least partially, influenced by the action stuff in Other M. Because the action stuff in Other M looked cool,
Yeah.
And they did put an Other M looking Samus into Smash Bros. Because, in Smash Bros. Brawl, the Prime Varia suit was the definitive look of Samus, and that's what they used. And then starting with Smash 4 on Wii U, right? They did the more sort of like lean, athletic looking version of the suit from Other M.
Yeah.
So, even though Other M was sort of a piece of history people want to forget about, I think that because it was made by Team Ninja and they made the action stuff look cool in it, I think they actually kind of wanted to retry that, but actually do it better this time, by making her more of like an action thing.
Yeah, and I think that if you were going to pull anything from Other M, the fancy over-the-top action sequences is a good way to go, because if you're going to pull from
Yeah,
story
just
stuff,
just
you're going
don't
to piss
tell
off
any
people.
just don't tell anyone that you're getting it from Other M,
Yeah.
which is what they're doing. Um, oh, wait, something else I didn't like, just since we're talking about the action. There are a couple of boss fights, specifically the bosses with the shields, like the literal shield, like the Chozo holding up a shield, and the final boss is phase 2, where you're just forced to wait until they do something. You are literally, like, final boss phase 2, you can't hurt him. You're literally just forced to wait until he does a move that you can counter. I hate that kind of stuff, especially in action games.
I don't like waiting, yeah.
Why should I be forced to wait on them to do something based on RNG? That completely makes the pace of the game come to a screeching halt, right? And it's so weird because the other phases are really fun.
Well, is it 100% RNG? Like, or if maybe you shoot him more, like maybe that triggers him to attack you faster?
No,
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure you just have to wait. That honestly is like some Mega Man X6 type stuff, like high max. Like you can't damage him with the Buster Shot.
You don't like High Max? He's such a good boss.
I hate not being. I think that is like contrary to a fundamental aspect about Mega Man up to that point. They make it where you can't hurt High Max unless you have like the right sort of ability. You can't hurt him with regular Buster. That's terrible.
Yeah.
He looks cool though.
He does look cool, but like he doesn't really move or do anything. He's just stoic and just stays in his power stance.
And it says dishope. Isn't that what he says when he drops up?
Something like that.
I think he looks cool, and I kind of love to hate him. I love to legitimately hate him, as in I think he's a terrible boss. Because you can't hurt him with Buster, and that's how I feel when I'm shooting at the final boss, phase 2 in Dread, and I can't hurt him, and I'm just waiting. Anyways, okay, I'm going into story now.
Okay.
I am going to sort of recap the story so I can remind myself what happened, and also so I can cross-examine my understanding of it with you, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. Because I only saw the story on my first playthrough, right? And then, I've been speedrunning it since then, and I'm skipping all the cutscenes, so it's not as if I've seen it more than once.
Very much the same with me, so I'm going to try my best to recall it as best I can.
Anybody watching this, if you notice that I'm somehow like overlooking something with the story, please correct me, because I really, really, really want this story to make sense. I'm still kind of coping with the story in this game, because by the time I finished beating the game for the first time, I was just sort of in the state of cognitive dissonance because I've been waiting so long for this game, right? And I legitimately, unironically, really like Metroid lore, so I was super excited to see what would happen. And I think this story has a lot of cool elements and ideas in it, but when you start to think about the story, it just makes no sense. And I couldn't even fully enjoy the final escape sequence because I was so hung up on the story, just hoping it would make sense. And I was hoping that after beating the game, I could just look up a YouTube video, search like Metroid Dread story explained, and hopefully someone smarter than me, and I was hoping that the story would have made perfect sense to someone smarter than me, and they would have explained it to me, and then I would finally be at peace and I would understand the story. But lo and behold, no one is talking about the story, which is weird because it makes no sense to me. So are other people just getting it and that's why they're not talking about it, or are they just ignoring it because it doesn't make sense? So
let's go through
your
summary, and then we'll try to touch each point.
So at the end of Fusion, they assumed that they had eradicated all of the X parasite by the end of Fusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then at the start of Dread, they receive some kind of anonymous. They receive a video message from an anonymous sender of an X, right, from a planet. Yes. Which leads the Galactic Federation to believe that the X is not extinct, right? So they build the Emmys to go down there and kill the X, right? That's why they built the Emmys. Because Samus is the only known organism in the galaxy that is immune to X, right? Because she has the Metroid DNA. But they don't just want to send a single person down to, like, search a whole planet for X, right? That's why they make the Emmys, right?
I'm not sure if that's why they make the Emmys or if the Emmys already existed, but maybe I have to go back and read that.
They specifically mentioned that the Emmys were designed to like extract DNA. I don't know why they would make them extract DNA if their mission was to kill the X parasites. Maybe they wanted to learn more about the X, right? The thing is, like, the X are kind of like the Tyranids from Warhammer in that they sort of store the genetic information of whatever they take over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can take over one animal, store its genetic information, then take over another animal, and then it can, like, switch between the two, right? That's how it works?
It copies their DNA and their
it can copy their memories too, right? So that's another point I'm going to bring up later. Okay, so that's why they made the Emmys, right? To go investigate the planet with the X, I think.
Yeah, that's why they sent them for sure, though.
And then they eventually lost communication with it, right? So they knew something went wrong. So that's why they call in Samus to go down there and investigate, right?
Yeah, because the X can't affect her because she has Metroid DNA.
So far, so good. Ravenbeak shows up. By the way, I'm assuming names like Quiet Robe and Ravenbeak are not their names in their native language, because that's not how Chozo sounds. I'm assuming it's just like some kind of translation into English, right?
It could be.
Like their human name, for lack of a better term.
I noticed in their language that like translates to the actual name of things is like the Thoha and the Mawkin. Like you hear that in their language.
Yeah. So I'm assuming, like, you don't hear them say Ravenbeak. So I'm assuming that's just, like, a translated version of the name, right? So that's not a big deal. I just wanted to ask.
Right, probably.
So Ravenbeak catches her as soon as she lands, right? And he fights her a little bit, and then she blacks out and wakes up, and she's trying to figure out why Ravenbeak didn't just kill her, right? Mm-hmm. So it's because... And obviously, you know, this is a spoiler video. I'm pretty sure that's already obvious. I just want to bring it up again before I get into this. So the reason he decides to not kill her is because he wants the Metroid DNA within her to fully wake up, right?
Yes.
Sort of like awaken the Metroid within her, because the Toha Chozo DNA within her is sort of suppressing the Metroid DNA, because the Toha are able to control the it's the Toha, right? The Chozo tribe that controls the Metroids.
They created the Metroids and they could control them. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So because they can control the Metroids, that's how she's kind of able to handle the Metroid DNA within her, right?
Yes.
It's kind of funny, Samus, at this point in the story is like just some petri dish of DNA, right? Because it's like human DNA plus Chozo DNA plus X got in her plus the Metroid vaccine to suppress it. So she's just like this Frankenstein of a monster. Anyways, so like, do we know why he knows that she has Metroid DNA in her?
I'm sure that like he heard about it just from like Galaxy.
Okay, so let's just assume he had like intel figure that out. Okay.
Yeah.
So he kept her alive, and she did in fact have the same Adam AI in her ship from Fusion, right? But when she woke up and she was far away from the ship, and she thought she had sort of uploaded, so when she goes up to when she goes up to the Adam terminals, I'm assuming she's just like turning it on and like making like a relay server so she can talk to Adam from her ship, or at least that's what she thought, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
she was talking directly to those terminals.
So she thought she was like using the terminals to make a relay server to communicate with Adam at her ship. But this was actually Ravenbeak talking to her, pretending to be Adam, so he could string her along and help her wake up the Metroid DNA, right?
So I've heard some people say that it's possible, or they thought that they were talking to Adam for at least some of the time, but at some point it changed to Ravenbeak.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true.
But it's still the same principle, though, right? I just want to make sure I'm understanding everything.
Right.
And so we find out Ravenbeak reprogrammed the Emmys to extract... So basically, the narrative that Samus is told from Adam, who is actually Ravenbeak, is that the Emmys have been reprogrammed by Ravenbeak to steal her DNA so that they can get a copy of the Metroid DNA and clone more Metroids, right?
Mm-hmm.
If this was the case, couldn't they just, like, scratch her and get her blood or something?
Maybe they need more of a sample
size. Okay, so the first assumption, let's assume that they need to, like, actually impale her chest with that giant syringe to get a DNA sample for some reason. For some reason, they have to kill her to get DNA sample. So what's the next thing? She finds Quiet Robe, who gives her the exposition that there was a dissenting tribe of Chozo, a warlike Chozo, right? That wanted to keep the Metroids because the Toha created the Metroids, right? That's why they can control them.
Yes.
So I thought that Ravenbeak, I thought that the enemy faction of Chozo were going to be the ones that were wanting to perform Exterminatus on the planet with Metroids, because I thought it would have been a way more compelling and interesting antagonist faction if they were the ones that were wanting to destroy the Metroids, like, and be extreme about it, right? Because like maybe the Toha, they thought that they could control it, right? Mm-hmm. But then are they called Mockin?
The Mockin are Ravenbeaks.
Yeah, okay. I thought that the Toha were going to be the proponents of keeping the Metroids, saying that they could control them, and that the Mockin didn't want to take any chances, and they wanted to blow up the planet with the Metroids on it, right? Because then their actions would have been coming from a place of self-preservation, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought that Ravenbeak was hunting Samus so she could stop the Galactic Federation from making more Metroids out of her.
Here, a little bit of information that comes from Samus Returns, because they do actually have images that show all these different Chozo working to get rid of the X and like make the Metroids, and then they actually have images that show Ravenbeak and Quiet Robe. So it's trying to be like a prequel to
so like Metroid if they even if they showed them and they were alluding to the fact, they could have still made it so that the Toha were wanting to keep the Metroids, and that the Mockin were the ones that were wanting to take no chances, right? Because
what happened was that the Metroids started to eat the Aeon that's on the planet, and the Aeon started making them shift in a way that they were not listening to the Toha as well, and they were fighting back. And so that's probably why they thought that they were too dangerous and wanted to get rid of them.
What I'm saying is, though, there's still a camp that wants to keep the Metroids, and there's a camp that wants to get rid of them, right? I thought that the camp that wanted to keep them would have been the Toha, and the camp that wanted to get rid of them were the Mockin.
Yeah.
Because I just think that would have made I thought that would have been a much more interesting antagonist faction, right? Because like I said, instead of Ravenbeak wanting to weaponize the Metroids again by stealing Samus's DNA, I thought Ravenbeak was worried about the Galactic Federation stealing her DNA and making Metroids to weaponize them. And so he was wanting to do like a preemptive strike by killing her before the Galactic Federation could use her DNA, right? Because then it would have been a much more like ethically nuanced situation where Samus would have to consider like, maybe I should let them kill me, you know? So that way I don't, like, I'm too dangerous to be alive, right? So long as I'm alive, any kind of species could use me to create an army of Metroids. You know what I mean? I thought that would have...
I see what you're saying.
And I thought that would have really helped the whole effect of being hunted by these Emmys, right? Because then you'd be feeling like the whole like world is against you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And for good reason. But no, it just turns out that Ravenbeak wants to use her to make like Metroid clones, which is kind of boring because that's exactly what the Space Pirates wanted to do, right? The Space Pirates tried cloning Metroids. Yeah. So it feels as if Ravenbeak and his faction isn't offering anything new, right? It's not a new kind of villain or anything, because it's exactly what the Space Pirates tried to do. It's just, a new villain wants to weaponize Metroids. So I thought it would have been really interesting and different and unique if they were wanting to stop the Galactic Federation and any other race from creating Metroids as a weapon again.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's a cool idea. I think the reason that they didn't go with it is probably because maybe they wanted to expand the Chozo lore a little bit so that it's not like they're just this like saintly race of people, and like they wanted to have like different factions of like
I don't think it harms the lore at all. I just think it feels like it's retreading ground that we've already seen when it could have been an opportunity to make like a different kind of villain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like this kind of villain is pretty much all bad, right? Because it's just he wants to create He just wants to create a bioweapon so he can take over the universe.
There's nothing redeemable, really. He just wants power. He says it over and over again.
Because we literally already have the Space Pirates and Ridley for that, and I think they fulfill that archetype perfectly, right? Like, you know, we don't need another villain that's just a mustache twirler. Ridley and his Space Pirates are the mustache twirler, right? So I feel like the Chozo, they could have used that to make some more like nuanced, like ethical situations. So she gets the Quiet Robe, who tells her about how the Makin wanted to keep the Metroids, but the Toha got rid of them, right?
Right.
And only the Toha could control them. The Makin could not control the Metroids. So Ravenbeak and the Makin killed all of those Chozo except Quiet Robe, so they could keep him like as a prisoner and force him into controlling Metroids for them, right?
Yes.
But they didn't have any Metroids, right?
No, but that's what they were banking on.
So they were just so they were
DNA for.
okay. So they were keeping him, and they were going to use him to control the Metroids.
Yeah.
Okay. So hold on, there was another exposition thing, right? Oh yeah. Okay. So X got to this planet and ravaged the Makin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So apparently, like way before fusion, an X was masquerading as a Chozo, which came back to that planet, right?
Okay.
I'm asking.
Wait, can you repeat that one
So
more time?
part of the exposition dump that Quiet Robe gives Samus is that the reason the X is alive and well on ZDR and why it ravaged the Makin was because, like, way before fusion, there was an X masquerading as a Chozo, and it was brought to ZDR in a ship, right?
Yeah, it was part of the Makin army.
Okay, and the reason the Galactic Federation didn't know about this was because this was just like a Chozo planet, right? That up to that point had no communication with the Galactic Federation.
I think ZDR is a Makin Chozo planet, basically.
Okay, yeah.
Claimed by the Makin.
So Ravenbeak is living on this planet that's been ravaged by the X, and is keeping Quiet Robe alive for when he gets the Metroids, right? But the X were being kept in that one building, right?
Yeah, they were released later on, yeah.
They don't explain why they released it, right? Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. So you go to a certain point in the game and the doors open up and the X come out, right?
Yes.
Presumably because Ravenbeak released them. So I'm guessing the X sort of ravaged the planet, and then Ravenbeak and his Makin were able to somehow contain them after all that damage, right?
I think... Wait, contain them after they were released?
Well, we know that they ravaged the place because, like, you see a bunch of broken stuff and unmanned things, and there aren't many Chozo left. Quiet Robe was saying that it was because of the X.
Right.
And then you walk up to that certain building. Was it Elon?
Might have been Elon.
And then the door opens and X come out. And then Adam, who is actually Ravenbeak, tells Samus that this must surely be the doing of Ravenbeak, even though we don't know why he would do such a thing. And so we are supposed to think... So I'm assuming he did that so that way she would absorb more X, so that way it would help to wake up her Metroid DNA.
That could make sense.
Right? Like her having to fight... Because, like, the Metroid is the natural predator of X. Like, she had to, like, feed it more in order to wake it up or something. And that's why he was saving it.
Yeah,
right?
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
I actually have a theory that I want to bring up later, but I'm not going to bring it up until I'm done recounting all of this. So, Quiet Robe got killed by one of the, like, Chozo robot things, right? Those Chozo that explode when you kill them, those are robots, right?
Yeah, they're not actual
okay.
Chozo.
So one of those things that's working for Ravenbeak kills Quiet Robe, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when the X get... Okay, so Quiet Robe turns off the Emmys. So before Quiet Robe gets killed, he knows that the Emmys are hunting Samus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he turns them off for her. To help her. Right?
Yes.
And so when the X come back, an X infects Quiet Robe's corpse and immediately turns on the Emmys again. No, this doesn't make sense in any possible explanation, okay? Because let's say the X, because I know Chozo are supposed to be kind of like special in that they can like astral project and stuff. So like potentially Chozo are able to kind of like, maybe Chozo are able to keep control over their bodies even when they're infected by an X. Well, let's say that didn't happen, okay? Let's say it is the X in control of this body, okay?
Yeah.
And it gets all of Quiet Robe's memories, right? Because like you said at the beginning, an X, when it takes over a body, not only does it copy its genetic code and make a perfect copy of it, but it also has all of its memories. But it knows it's an X, right? It still has a sense of self-preservation.
That's kind of the most important thing to an X, I think.
Yeah, so the thing is, if an X took over Quiet Robe with his memories and knowledge, the X would know that the Emmys are chasing down Samus to get her Metroid DNA, so that way Metroid DNA can be mass-produced as a bioweapon. And the X know that that would lead to the X's extinction, because Metroids are the X's predators. Right?
Unless they feel like Samus is just going to eat all of them, and so in that way they're trying to kill Samus.
See, this is where it starts relying on a lot of assumptions. So if it is an X and it's concerned about its self-preservation, it would want to kill Samus, right?
Yeah.
So I thought the twist was going to be that the X-infected... I thought that the twist was going to be that the X-infected Quiet Robe changed the Emmy's setting from extract the DNA of Samus to just straight up kill her and like incinerate her body. So that way Ravenbeak couldn't copy the DNA from her. So I thought it was going to be like the X end up usurping Ravenbeak like as a secondary antagonist and end up being a bigger threat, right? Like I thought it was going to be like Ravenbeak thought he could control them, but then they basically like one-up him by trying to kill Samus to stop him from mass-producing Metroids. I thought it was going to be like that, right?
Yeah.
However, at the end of the game, when her Metroid DNA is like fully awoken and she can't control it, zombie-looking Quiet Robe, who's infected with an X parasite, is apparently still in control of his body and is a Toha, so that's presumably why he's able to put her Metroid DNA back in sort of sleep mode, right?
It's the only thing I can think of.
The thing is though, if that's the case, if Quiet Robe really was in control of his body the whole time and was fully conscious, why did he turn the Emmys back on to chase down Samus if he just turned them off right before dying?
It could be that he wasn't fully in control. Maybe he only like really regained.
But why
control.
would the X want to turn it on? If they would know with Quiet Robe's memories that Ravenbeak wants to get Samus's DNA by using the Emmys.
It's rough.
Do you see what I've seen several people play the game, and I don't hear anybody asking these questions about the story when it makes absolutely zero sense, right? This relies on so many like weird assumptions and theories, and I don't hear anyone talking about that either. So did everyone just have different cutscenes in their copy of the game or something?
No, I don't think so. The only other things to even add to this are Quiet Robe also said something like right before like he gave himself basically to Samus at the very end. What did he say? He said, "I'm counting on you." So like he's still talking and relating to her.
See, when he said that, I thought he was talking about the Emmys. Because if it was an X reprogramming the enemies to kill rather than DNA extract, he could be like, "I'm counting on you to kill her and get rid of all the Metroid DNA in the known universe." You know what I mean? So like, maybe from beyond the grave, Quiet Robe was able to see like in a domino effect of some kind that he needed to turn the Emmys on so that way Samus would fight them and get their powers or something.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, like, you figure with the Emmys being turned off and just sitting there, you would still be able to blow them up and get their power-ups, right?
Yeah.
So that's also a weak argument, in my opinion. Because whether the Emmys are on or not, she should still be able to shoot them with the Omega Cannon.
Yeah, if you can get to the Omega Cannon, but
But
They're
like
usually open.
canonically, story-wise, there would be no reason to believe that the Omega Cannon would be inaccessible when you turn off the Emmys.
I guess, but maybe she just wasn't prioritizing that, and she was just like, okay, now I could focus more on the grander mission or something.
So another sort of twist at the end is that when Ravenbeak reveals to Samus that in kind of a weird way, like this was depicted in a really weird way because he was kind of like teasing her a little bit. I feel like if someone were to take that scene a bit more literally, it would be even more confusing to them. But Ravenbeak reveals to her that he was kind of stringing her along, pretending to be Adam the whole time, right?
Yes.
And then when he grabs her, like in that cutscene where he thinks he won, he says how he doesn't need her anymore because he's going to make like an army or something. Or what does he say? He grabs her and then says like he doesn't need her anymore or something. And I found that really confusing because is he saying that he basically already has her DNA? When he first said that, I thought that he meant that he had already gotten some of her DNA. But
I think there's a part of him that kind of wanted to almost recruit her, but when that became like not a possibility...
I'm thinking he actually did have the Emmys set to extract her DNA as like plan A, and if she had her Metroid DNA woken up in the process, that would be like a bonus.
Yeah.
He says like he says something like "I don't need you anymore" or something when he grabbed her. I don't know what he meant by that. I think he meant like he can kill her now because he can get her DNA. I think. What's weird is that the X didn't have any effect on the story at all. Right?
Well, because the X were the thing that like kicked off the whole story, so they had to be around for the long haul.
I heard someone else saying like I saw someone else's first reaction thinking that when he said that he meant that he was going to use the X to clone fully woken up Metroid version of Samus.
Well, he did want to clone. He said he wanted to clone the most powerful Metroid of all.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about normal cloning though. I'm talking about he had the X's like he had the X in a container and he was saving them so he could use those to make clones of Metroid Samus.
Yeah, but X couldn't.
But then the thing is, the X couldn't be controlled because you would need just a regular Metroid so he could have Quiet Robe control them. And then before I get to my theory, the one last twist. They didn't really explicitly explain what was going on because it was mostly like a series of images in a flashback. So correct me if I'm wrong in what I got from this. But when he said he was Samus's father, a la Darth Vader, was it showing? So basically, they start to like make you think. They start to make you question why Samus is so strong, right? Because they say the Makin are the warrior Chozo that are super strong and athletic, right? Whereas the Toha Chozo are the more peaceful, nature-loving ones, right?
Right.
And they were basically making you question why Samus would be so strong from Chozo DNA if she only got Toha DNA, presumably, right? And the twist at the end made it seem like Ravenbeak, like when Samus was unconscious and having her DNA infused with Chozo DNA or whatever the process was, Ravenbeak actually went in there and killed the Chozo that were in the lab or whatever, and he put his own DNA in Samus. Because obviously he's not her literal father, right? Because we know her parents are humans from the manga, right? When Ridley comes and kills her parents.
Right.
So was he saying that was he basically saying that she not only has Toha Chozo DNA in her, but also Makin DNA, and that's why she's so strong?
I think she has both, and I don't think that Ravenbeak was an enemy or anything like that when it happened.
At the time, it was like another tribe that had like their differences, right?
I don't think they might have had differences, but I don't think that they were against each other.
That had to have been way after the Toha got rid of the Metroids, though, or at least tried to, right? Because that was way before. Because Samus didn't even know that the Chozo made Metroids, right? Until Fusion.
I don't remember when she would have found out.
Yeah, I think she found out in Fusion, right? So the Chozo that raised her are like generations later, like so many generations later after the old Chozo had made Metroids. Because I feel like they would have told her about that. Unless they did.
They might have.
Anyways, the bigger question is, why would Ravenbeak bust in there and give some random human girl his Mockin DNA if she didn't have any kind of Metroid DNA at that time? So he couldn't have possibly predicted that she would have gotten Metroid DNA later and that he would want to clone her.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, there's nothing really to be gained from that unless he was going to use her at some point.
But there's no way he would have thought about that, because there's no way he would have known that she had Metroid DNA at the time, right?
Well, maybe try to recruit her to just be part of his army.
Maybe. The thing is, this relies on so many assumptions, and the thing is, this game's story does have some pretty big exposition dumps every now and then. Yeah. And so, like, I'm completely fine with a cryptic story that you have to figure out and theorize about, right? Like Dark Souls type stories. However, this game has some straight up exposition dumps, which leads me to believe that the developers thought that they were being clear with their story. It comes across as the developers wanting you to think like, oh, it all makes sense now when you hear the twist at the end. But it doesn't. It just made me even more confused, right? So I feel like I wasn't enjoying it in the way I was supposed to enjoy it.
I feel like maybe if you read the manga, or if you look
I've read parts of the manga because it's never been officially translated, right? So I've read, like, I remember years ago I read a fan translated version of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I overlooking anything with the story or anything like that?
No, I don't. The only thing that I just want to make sure that you say, because I thought that you said that Ravenbeak kind of like forced his DNA into Samus.
Yeah, because he called her he was saying that he was her father, right? Which was a metaphorical sense, because he's not her literal father. But in a flashback, it showed Samus in that tube, right? And then the Toha Chozo in there. Presumably that was when they were giving her their DNA, right? Because when the Chozo, so like when Samus's parents got killed, it was because the Chozo, not colonists, but you know, the Toha want to go out in the universe and like spread their technology and their teachings and learn stuff.
Yeah.
There was a faction of Toha Chozo which came to Samus's planet, and the reason why Ridley and the Space Pirate showed up is because they followed the Chozo there. So when Ridley killed Samus's parents, the Chozo felt super guilty about it, right? Because they basically led Ridley right there. So to kind of make up for it, that's why they decided to take her in, raise her, and then give her Chozo DNA so she would be stronger and have a better fighting chance against Ridley, because they feel like they owe it to her to give her the opportunity to get her revenge on Ridley. So I'm assuming that's what we were seeing when she was in the glass tube, and then it showed Ravenbeak go in there. So I'm assuming the reason he went in there was to make it where he also gave her Mockin DNA, which explains why she's so strong, and also explains why he said he was her father.
Well, that's why he says he's her father, but definitely not a father from like raising her. That like
right. I'm just speaking. I'm just saying like it's a metaphorical sense, because he like apparently put his own DNA in her.
Right. He donated. He was one of the Chozo that donated his DNA when all the Chozo were all good with each other.
In the flashback scene with the images, it made it look like he like forcefully like broke and entered there, like by like he wasn't allowed in there, and he just kind of forced his way in.
It could be that.
Maybe
way.
I'll have to look at it again and like look at the pictures, because I remember I thought there was like a Chozo laying on the ground or something when he went in there.
I didn't look at the image super closely after the first like playthrough.
Okay, well I'm just going to assume that like he was just like he either like broke in there and did it without them knowing, like, you know, because then other Toha would have gone in there after he left, and then they'd be like, what happened? I don't know, someone just came in and attacked, and then they just forgot about it, or he was allowed in there and he was just a donor just because. That's not a part of the story I'm hung up on, right? I was just wanting to make sure I understood it correctly. You want to hear a theory I kind of made, which can rationalize it a bit better?
Sure.
So, you know how you fight multiple X-infected Chozo throughout the game?
Yeah.
It kind of seems like they're actually working for Ravenbeak, right? Because especially at the end, that red and gold one, the way they're standing like sentries when you're getting near the end of the game.
Yeah, I could see why you'd say that.
If they were just X, they would either be doing whatever they want, like out in the wild, or they would be specifically trying to kill Samus by hunting her, right? they didn't really look like they were chasing her down to kill her. They looked like they were guarding the, like, Hanubia, right?
Right.
And the reason why I'm thinking, if it is true that Quiet Robe was able to keep control of his body after getting infected with X, then it's also reasonable to believe that Mach and Chozo can control their body even after being infected by X, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw this or not, but one of the images I got when I got 100% completion in the game, you know how when you get 100% completion, you get some like images to look at, some art, which is all pretty cool, by the way.
Yeah, really good artwork.
One of those images, it showed Ravenbeak standing in front of a big crowd of Mach and Chozo, like he was demonstrating something to them, and he was standing beside a Chozo that was being actively infected by X and like transforming, and it looked like he was showing it to a whole bunch of Mach, and like he was showing them, like it didn't look like an X had broken in there and that they were reacting to it. It looked like he was actually deliberately infecting one and showing it to the rest of the Mach-in. So if my interpretation of that picture is right, then that might have been when he was sort of experimenting with seeing if a Chozo can control his own body after being infected.
It could be.
Right?
I'm looking at the images right now. I'm trying to find. So my interpretation of the one that's infected, I'm looking at the image. I thought that this was just that they discovered that it was an infected Chozo that came along with them.
It's possible, but the way they're like standing there, it doesn't look like they're acting scared or militant against it. It looks like they're just kind of watching a demonstration with Ravenbeak standing there.
Well, Ravenbeak definitely looks super stoic.
Because
the
like
the Chozo in front of him looks kind of scary.
Because but I mean they could be, but Ravenbeak doesn't look like he's attacking it, right? He looks like he rounded them up to show them something, and they're all scared because he's like. Ravenbeak could be like the kind of villain that's willing to like sacrifice his own soldiers to get a goal, right? And so he could be showing them like what he's going to do to all of them, right?
Yeah.
Because
he does actually sacrifice some Chozo to one of the bosses in one of the artworks. Like he has them tied up and he's like throwing them into the boss's mouth.
Yeah. So I think that was kind of showing you how he doesn't really value his subjects' lives too much. So maybe instead of the place being ravaged by X, what he actually did was he kind of did he deliberately infected his own people with X, and only a certain percentage of them could still control their bodies, and they became like the elite royal guards, and they just had to kill everyone else or something.
Yeah, like weeding them out, like finding the strongest Chozo that can still retain their...
And if that's the case, that would also explain why Quiet Robe is able to control his own body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of standing theory I'm going with for now, because that makes it make a little more sense to me, and I really want it to make sense.
The only other thing is that, like, it appears that those types of Chozo are guarding because that's what they copied in terms of, like, self-defense.
Yeah, it is true that's what they copied, right? But I mean the fact that they're literally, like, standing beside each other. Like, in Hanubia or wherever it is. And again, if it was just one of these things, I wouldn't be thinking about the theory. It's just like all the things added up.
And, and also blocking Samus to prevent her because her goal is to wipe out the X again, right?
But so, she wasn't really going after the X. She was going after Ravenbeak.
Right, no, she's going after Ravenbeak, but like there's a lot of factors.
And the thing is, when you crash the ship and you make it back to the surface of the planet and Ravenbeak gets infected with an X, for some reason he turns into Kraid. That confused me at first, but I'm guessing it's just because they're implying that X copied Kraid's body once you killed Kraid, and then it was just coincidentally one of them that copied Kraid's body. Is that what we're supposed to assume?
It's just a big amalgamation. I heard that it also has copies of other enemies or things as well.
Yeah, so are we assuming that when Kraid died, a bunch of X like gobbled up parts of his body and like got copies of his DNA, and that was just one of them that infected Ravenbeak?
I would say that.
It's not like an actual story reason, right? It's just something like that.
Yeah.
It still retained Ravenbeak's face for some reason. Which is another reason why I'm thinking that the Chozo still have control over their body, right?
Yeah. He also, I read about this, but I didn't hear this during. But apparently, Ravenbeak says when he's crawling towards Samus at the end, he says like the thing about strength that he always says, Hadar sen Olmen or whatever it is.
Oh, he's still talking. So yeah, that wouldn't, because like I didn't hear that either. But if he does say that, that would, like, an X wouldn't, even if an X has the memories of that, I don't think they would care about spouting out his philosophy, right?
Right, of course. So,
because I mean, if an X copying a person's brain and memories also made them adopt their own like philosophy and beliefs, then the Sax wouldn't have been chasing down Samus in Fusion, right?
Mm-hmm. The Sax.
I'm calling it Sax. S-A-X.
Oh my god. Yeah, the only reason I would say for them to say anything unique like that would be to try and protect their own, hide their identity. You know, kind of like the movie The Thing. Like
that would be interesting, but that can't be it because, you know, like they wouldn't have done some of the things they did in the game. Although that would have been a cool plot point to follow. Like I said, I think the story has a lot of cool ideas and elements, like how, like the body horror of Samus turning into a Metroid, you know, dissenting Chozo tribes, you know, disagreeing with each other, keeping one of them alive so they can like use him to control Metroids, and like keeping the X in a facility. I think all that's really cool. It's just, I'm really confused because with all the exposition dumps, like I said, it comes across as if it's supposed to be a 100% crystal clear story that you're supposed to understand fully, when I obviously don't. Whereas when you play something like Dark Souls, you know that the story is supposed to be cryptic, and it's supposed to spawn theories, you know?
I think when it comes to 2D Metroid, they do want to leave a little bit to try and like theory craft.
Yeah,
because
maybe.
If you look at the Prime series, everything is spelled out so blatantly. You could scan everything. There's an explanation for anything.
Well, at the end of each Metroid Prime game, if you get 100% completion, there is a little teaser for the next game. So they obviously want people to theorize about the next game until it's out. You know what I mean?
Right, but the stuff happening during the game,
yeah,
all the stuff that we're talking about, like that's more spelled out in that series. But I feel like in this type, they want to keep things vague so that they have more freedom to do what they want in the next game.
Plus scanning things in Prime gives you a lot of exposition or world building, I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's crazy.
That would have been cool if activating the scan device in Dread fills up a bestiary or something like that. If they're like any kind of enemy in a room, when you have the scan thing active, it just automatically adds it to a bestiary or something, and then you can read about them.
Yeah, I don't want to get off topic, but I think they do that in that fan game.
Really?
Like they have like a not a scanner, but like they do have explanations for things in a log.
So I think I think I pretty much said everything I could say about the story, right? So I'm willing to move on to more meta stuff now, since it's kind of going that way, unless there's something else about the story you want to bring up first.
I think that we touched upon mostly everything. The only thing that we could go more in depth on would be like the relationship between the two tribes, because they do touch upon that a little bit in Samus Returns, but not like with text or anything. It's only with images.
Yeah.
So it's only whatever you can try and deduct yourself for the most part. But a lot of what they showed in Samus Returns did carry over to Dread, so it might be worth like looking at some of those images or playing the game again on the 3DS just to like get a little bit more perspective.
I'm really curious how much independence Mercury Steam has when it comes to the story and stuff like that, because Sakamoto is in charge of the production. But I don't know if he's actually reading I'm sure they have to pass everything by him, right? But I don't know if he's just, turning things down or not turning things down, or if he's actually having an active role in writing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
who knows?
He made the story in Other M, and to an extent, I actually have to respect it, because he said that if he had a second chance to make Other M differently, he said he wouldn't make it any different. Like he says that game is a perfectly accurate representation of what he was wanting to make. So I respect it in that sense, right? I like it like knowing when someone's creative vision is accurately fulfilled, right? So I'm happy for him that he actually made what he wanted to make. But because of Nintendo knowing how badly that game sold, I'm wondering if they made it so he had less of a say in the story. But, you know, he is the guy in charge, so maybe he did. I don't know.
It could be, but also, if Other M sold poorly, then why are they still acknowledging it in the artwork for Metroid Dread? Like,
Well,
you can
I mean,
unlock an Other M
they know
picture.
it. They know it's canon. They can't just say it didn't happen. I don't think including an Other M picture is bad, because, like, I actually like it when a franchise acknowledges all of its parts, even the bad parts, you know, because some people out there, like, their first Metroid game was Other M, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some Mega Man fans out there, their first Mega Man game was X7.
Well,
I bet someone's first DMC game was DMC2. You know what I mean? So, like, regardless if it's a good game or not, I don't think you should. I think you have to take the good and the bad, right? I respect it when a franchise acknowledges the good and bad. You know, they're obviously not trying to glorify Other M, and they're obviously not trying to say, like, that's what they're going to do next. So I'm glad that they just gave, like, a little nod, like, artwork for Other M, you know, artwork for each game.
The only reason I brought it up is that if they included that type of nod or reference, that he probably still has a lot of say, and I'm sure that he's giving Mercury Steam, like, a lot of pushback of, like, whatever they want to add to, like, they are making it, so
Yeah.
they don't want to just, like, jerk them around entirely. But
Normally the logic with, like, outsourcing a big AAA franchise to another studio, though, is usually like in a case where if Nintendo is outsourcing their franchise to a different studio, the studio that they're outsourcing work to just does, like, manpower type stuff, right? Okay. Whereas all the creative stuff would come from Nintendo themselves. That's normally how a situation like that works. But I don't think there's any way to actually know unless you're actually involved in the development itself, because I don't think they actually reveal that kind of stuff publicly.
So he could have a lot to do with the overall way that the story is going.
I like to think that Other M did canonically happen. It just didn't happen in the way they depicted it in the game, right? Like, I like to think that the main story beats of Other M happened, but canonically the dialogue wasn't that insufferable.
If you tweak a couple of things about Other M, I think people would at least accept it. Like, for what it is. But, like, the thing is, so many little tiny factors I don't even know. So many tiny little factors just piss people off, and I thought the game was fun. Okay, like, as a video game,
are we fully opening the Other M can of worms?
That's up to you.
Okay, because, like, the thing is, everybody knows it's a bit like the mainstream rhetoric is that the game sucks. Everyone wants to pretend it never happened, right? Like, over the past couple of days, apparently some people came out of the woodwork to, like, start defending Other M. Like, apparently some people, I guess they're just playing contrarian, right? Because, like, the rhetoric for so long has been that Other M is terrible. So I think some people recently were playing contrarian and started saying that the game's good. And then it got a bunch of people angry because they don't like how, you know, just because Metroid's relevant now, it's making these people come out of the woodwork defending Other M, right? I've always been a defender of Other M. Not that I think it's a great game, but because I think it's overhated.
I agree.
As a video game, right? I think it's not a good Metroid game, and I agree that the characterization of Samus and the dialogue is insufferable. But the actual gameplay of the game and how the creator was dead set on making the whole game playable with the Wiimote held sideways, I find it kind of novel to an extent. You know what I mean? Like a play it once type thing.
Exactly. Like, it's not the worst thing ever, but the story could be.
The reason why it makes such little sense is I saw some people strawmanning on Twitter earlier saying how, like, if you don't like Other M, it means you're not you don't support people, like, with poor mental health or something, because you know how they try to, like, portray PTSD in Other M.
Yeah, because of her childhood.
The reason why it makes no sense is because this takes place after Super Metroid. So it's like, why would she be so vicious against Ridley this whole time and then suddenly shut down in front of him? You know?
I guess maybe because Ridley blew into pieces in Super Metroid. So, and then the planet blew up. So she
Well,
probably thought that he was just gone.
The main source of I think, if I'm remembering it right, it's been so long, but the main source of Samus's PTSD and Other M was due to seeing the baby Metroid sacrifice itself in front of her, right? Like that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. At least,
yeah.
Because it opens with the scene. I do think that the CG cutscenes. Also, by the way, I think the game was outsourced to Team Ninja, but I think they outsourced the cutscenes to some other animation studio. I thought it was cool seeing the scenes from Super Metroid in 3D, you know, minus Samus's deadpan voice. Yeah, again, it just makes no sense because like it doesn't make sense why she would go from how she acts and behaves and what she does in the other games to suddenly acting like that in Other M. You know,
going to like Fusion and Dread, where in Dread now she's almost like emotionless. Like
you can tell that they
angry, actually.
You can tell that they tried really hard to make Samus like super cool in this one to make up for Other M.
Yep, it felt like a clear statement to me.
I would disagree with her being emotionless though. At the end of the game, when you beat the game, I like how you don't literally see her mouth, but you can tell she smiles at the camera because her eyes squint. Like her eyes squint a little bit, you know, so you can kind of get the feeling that she's smiling at the camera. I think they just realized that. I think their corporate reaction to Other M. I don't think they fully understand why people dislike Other M, but I think they get it a little bit. I think their corporate understanding of people's reaction to Other M is people don't want to hear Samus talk a lot. And so they just make her talk less. I thought it was really... I should have brought this up during the story, right? Because it's not all negative, right? When Samus talked in Chozo, that was actually really cool.
That was awesome.
That's honestly my favorite part in the whole story in that game. Like, her saying that one line in Chozo. I honestly, like, I'm glad they went with a less is more type strategy, right? Because she's not a silent protagonist anymore, per se, you know?
Yeah.
But she's still supposed to be a very introverted type character, right? So her just saying that one line in Chozo, I think, had a lot of characterization in it, just by itself. Hearing her say that one thing. Because the thing is, if she's in these crazy environments all the time, you know, not surrounded by other people that she can talk to, she's not going to talk to herself. She's not going to talk out loud, you know? Mm-hmm. So she's kind of like a silent protagonist in essence, but not literally a silent protagonist. And I think that was the first time we've ever heard her speak Chozo, too, right? So that was just another really cool characterization, you know, in terms of her backstory, because Metroid Dread definitely feels a lot less epic than something like Super Metroid. It feels much more like a personal story for Samus.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with Super Metroid, it was like a galaxy threat, like a galaxy level threat, you know, stuff like that. Whereas in Metroid Dread, it definitely, you know, it's after Ridley's dead. You know, she already got her revenge on Ridley. It's weird how Ridley and the Space Pirates aren't in this game at all in Dread. Forgot to bring that up. I kept thinking Ridley was going to show up.
I'm glad.
So like she already got her revenge, right? So it's like, what does she do after it? So, and the fact that, you know, Dread involves the X and the Metroids and the Chozo, it feels like I said, a very personal story, in that she's having to like clean up all these loose ends that are directly tied to her backstory, you know?
Exactly.
Which I thought, like, again, I really like the themes and stuff in the story, right? Even if parts of it are confusing. What else was I saying?
You said that you liked her characterization. You like that's more of a personal story for Samus and her people and like growing up rather than just the space pirates.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you said you like that Ridley isn't in the game, right?
I'm glad that there's less space pirate anything in this game because we get it all the time.
I'm kind of neutral on it because they have always thought of a way to bring back Ridley one way or another, right? Even if it's literally a mecha Ridley.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I think a lot of people are still confused between Meta Ridley and Mecha Ridley. Meta Ridley is the real Ridley, just with cybernetic enhancements that shows up in Prime, right?
Okay.
Mecha Ridley is from Zero Mission, right? It's from...
At the end, yeah.
Yeah, and it's literally just a robot. It's not Ridley. I saw someone getting confused about that the other day, so I thought I should bring it up. I can't blame them for being confused about that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it says Mecha Ridley is an incomplete robot built by Ridley as a powerful weapon in his own likeness.
I think it's cool because it like I said, Ridley's a mustache twirling type villain, so it makes sense that he would create a robot in his own image because of how narcissistic he is.
It's so funny.
It's also pretty cool. A lot of people on, at surface level, it seems pretty cheesy, but I actually think it's really cool how Ridley is really smart, but he doesn't talk because he likes playing up the crazy feral dragon image when he's, ravaging a planet or something. They just think it's some random crazy feral dragon, but he's actually like at least human level intelligence, which I think makes him scarier, knowing that he can talk, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
They definitely could have thought of a way to reintroduce Ridley back into the game. That would have been cool if Ridley just showed up and killed Ravenbeak, right? You just ate Ravenbeak. I really like the main antagonist in games, I love it in the Mario and Luigi RPG games where Bowser actually gets to be the real villain. You're reminded why he's the mainstay villain and not just a one-off, at the end of Bowser's Inside Story or Mario and Luigi Dream Team, that kind of stuff. So I think they could have done it in a cool way. It definitely would have been kind of cheesy though. So I can see why they didn't do it, because then people would be rolling their eyes like, Ridley again, she has to eventually kill him for real, because which game was it where she actually killed him for real? Was Ridley in Fusion at all? There was an X copy of Ridley, right? Or did I fever dream that?
I don't think you fight Ridley in Fusion, but I do think you see a frozen Ridley somewhere.
If they made a very big deal about her finally getting her revenge on Ridley the last time she actually killed him, then I could understand them not wanting to bring Ridley back, because then it would kind of undermine her accomplishment when that's supposed to be the end of a character arc, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I love the big, cheesy mainstay villains, so I thought it would have been really cool if he just showed up and killed Ravenbeak.
Hang on, there is I haven't played Fusion in a long time. It looks like Ridley is in Fusion.
I think it's an X copy of Ridley though. So I said, they do not run out of ideas in how to bring Ridley back in some way, even if it's not literally Ridley, right? Because in Fusion, there's an X copy of Ridley. In Zero Mission, there's a robot Ridley. In Other M, there's another thing that's the same species as Ridley, but isn't Ridley.
Right. In Samus Returns, Ridley is the final boss, but it is Ridley.
Samus Returns is a remake of 2, though.
I know, and Ridley's not supposed to be in that, but they decided to shoehorn him in as the final boss.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they love Ridley, right? So maybe they just wanted to take a breather on him. So maybe that just means for sure he'll be in the next game.
Yes.
Although but the thing is, if Prime 4 takes place right after Prime 3, because for anyone that doesn't know, the Prime games, most people accept that the Prime games take place in between Metroid 2 and 3, right?
That is what I've heard several times, so I'm going to take that.
It's either between 1 and 2 or 2 or 3, right? Because at the end of 2, she gets the last Metroid and gives it to the scientist, and then it breaks out in Super Metroid. So in between that time, Prime could happen, I guess. Either way, my point is that if Prime 4 takes place right after Prime 3, but still before the next mainline game that takes place after Prime 3, Ridley could still be alive in that.
Yeah.
I think they're going to try making Silex a big part of the game, though, because at the end of Prime 3, if you 100% the game, remember how I said at the end of each game, if you get the 100% completion, they give you a little sequel bait?
Yep.
At the end of Prime 3, it's Silex's ship that follows Samus's ship at the end.
Yeah.
Which and apparently in Federation Farce, Silex is apparently a big character in it, and he steals a Metroid at the end.
Yeah, they're trying to hype up this character.
It's so funny how hard they're hyping up this character that debuted in Prime Hunters on the DS.
Oh, that takes me back
He-
playing that game.
He was just one of the many bounty hunters in Prime Hunters, and now they're trying to hype him up by putting him in Federation Farce. And he's in some sequel bait. His ship is in some sequel bait at the end of Prime 3. Like, he's never been on screen in any significant Metroid game. But apparently they're, like, building him up to be this big villain in Prime 4, which could be interesting, right? To have an actual, like, more of a humanoid villain. I know he's an alien, but when I say humanoid, I mean, like, you know, a person rather than Ridley.
Yeah, no, of course. I'd be curious to see what they do, and honestly, he would fit better in Prime than he would in any other 2D Metroid.
Yeah.
Like they could figure out how to fit him into the story. It'd be fine.
I think that would be cool, because the thing is, Prime 1 through 3 is a trilogy, right? And it's the whole story arc in that trilogy is the Phazon arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in Prime 1, you learn about what the Phazon is. In Prime 2, you see like more what the Phazon can do, and then in Prime 3, you finally finish the Phazon once and for all, right? So they definitely could not bring Phazon back. I think that would be a bad idea, you know? It would have to be some more kind of like miscellaneous story arc. Like with Silex, for example.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so much more excited for Prime 4 than how excited I was for Dread. Even though I was fairly excited for Dread, Shin Megami Tensei 5 is actually my most anticipated game this year.
Okay.
I have so much more confidence in Retro Studios than Mercury Steam.
Look, I'm just happy I got more Metroid, and that
Oh yeah, me
pretty
too.
Good.
Yeah.
I love both. If I could get a good 2D Metroid and a good 3D Metroid, then I am set. I'm not anticipating one more than the other. I wasn't, but like I will say this: when I was waiting years to hear more about Prime 4, and then all of a sudden Dread was dropped in our laps, I was like, yes.
Yeah, that was
please."
pretty exciting. I would imagine that the development of Dread actually started for real around the same time they rebooted Prime 4's development. Because I think they realized that Prime 4 was going to be so far off, they had to make something else to hold people over.
Yeah. So, I mean, either way, I'm happy with both series, but I could understand why some people might be more excited about one over the other, especially because Prime 4 is just, it's going to be in development for so long, I feel like.
Yeah. I forgot where I saw it, but like I saw like yet another leak talking about how they would release like a Prime trilogy remaster or something on Switch next year, which again would also lead you to believe that Prime 4 is a ways off.
Just to like buy time.
Yeah. So some other kind of meta stuff I wanted to talk about is we kind of talked about the sales already, right? I know this is kind of a non-issue for you and me. Like I'm pretty sure I know your opinion on it already, but what's your opinion on the price? Because for some reason, Metroid Dread being a full $60 was controversial to an extent when it came out. Which is which shouldn't be a controversy in my opinion, but it was. And I think it's mostly coming from people being surprised about how short the game is.
Yeah, oh god, you could get me talking about something like this for hours,
Yeah.
I swear. A game's length to me does not mean anything to the price.
Yeah, because
like,
I think a lot of people, they base their decision in purchasing a video game on some kind of money to time spent playing ratio, right? Like they look at how many hours they would spend in the game and then think about how much money that is per hour. And there is a logic to that, right? I don't think that's a wrong way of making a purchasing decision, right? You know, especially if you're only able to buy a few games a year, you would definitely want to, you know, buy ones that you can spend a lot of time in, because there are games that you can easily spend hundreds of hours in, right? But this is just, I think it's because it's been so long since a Metroid game has come out, people have kind of forgotten what the whole point of them is, you know? Like, when the Metroid is such a, you know, well-renowned AAA franchise that it has the branding of knowing like when you buy it, that you're getting something with no filler, no fluff, no microtransactions, no DLC advertisements. You're just getting a very well-crafted, handcrafted experience, right?
It's just dense with gameplay.
Yeah, and it's super replayable, right? And then obviously, me and you, you and me or I have been speedrunning it, so it'd be I. You and I have been speedrunning it, right? So that's obviously going to be more hours than a single playthrough. Right. Something that's a bit more fair, though, is I saw someone comparing it to Hollow Knight, and Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania, which is way longer than Metroid Dread, and Hollow Knight is incredibly good and doesn't feel like it has any kind of padding or filler at all. So I think that's probably the best counterpoint I've seen so far, especially because that's made by an indie studio. Right.
I still have to give Hollow Knight like an actual try because every time I play it, I fall off of it very quick.
Dude, yeah, you have to. That's like a must play.
I've been told that if you can get past the beginning part of it,
it has kind of a slow start because I would say the game definitely picks up once you get the wall jump and the air dash. Once you get the wall jump and the air dash, the movement becomes way more fun and a whole bunch of things open up, and that's kind of like where the game really starts,
Mm-hmm.
That's my one that's my one critique with the game, honestly. Oh, and it's been a while since I've played it, so I had to remember. So it having a slow start is kind of my one critique about Hollow Knight, plus the fact that once you get into late game, you have so much money, there's not really anything to spend money on.
Mm-hmm.
Because you buy everything and then you're just left with all this extra money. So I think I kind of wish that they either rebalanced the money or they gave you more things to buy in end game.
Right.
I think it's been a while since I played it, so maybe I had more critiques, but those are the ones I remember. But that's like a must play kind of game.
Yeah, I will absolutely. But my point being is that like
sorry to cut you off, but honestly, Hollow Knight, after having played Hollow Knight, that's why I am so skeptical about a company like Mercury Steam making a Metroidvania, because Hollow Knight raised the bar so high. I think Hollow Knight's a better video game than Metroid Dread for sure. If anybody's thinking, like, why should I buy Metroid Dread over Hollow Knight when Hollow Knight's so much longer? Like, yeah, Hollow Knight's definitely better. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy Dread because of that, though. I'm saying, Hollow Knight's better, but they're still both must-play games,
Yeah.
What were you saying?
I think it's gone.
Sorry, I cut you off and then you forgot.
No, it's fine.
We're talking about the price.
Right.
And then Hollow Knight having a slow start.
My point is, like, regardless of how Hollow Knight is, like, disregarding Hollow Knight, let me talk about something else. So, like, Steel Assault, right? This game that just came out recently. Yeah. This like 2D action game. You could beat it in, like, less than an hour. I think, like, especially if you get good at it, you could beat it in under a half hour. That game is $15, and people are complaining that it's too short. And I get that a game that you could beat technically in a half hour is very short, but I've already played it several times and gotten way more than my money's worth for it. So this is why price doesn't really make a difference to how good a game is and what the price is worth, because it depends on the person. I would gladly spend $60 on Dread because I just love that type of game, and I know that because Metroid is kind of one of the games that started the whole genre, or like at least refined it to a perfect, like not perfect, but like to a ridiculous degree.
It set the standard.
Exactly. That it's going to be worth it for the right type of person.
I've been playing I got the Castlevania Advance Collection on Switch, which I highly recommend to everyone, by the way, because those are some really good ports of some very expensive games if you want to buy them physically, right? And the exploration, even though I really like those games, the exploration in the Metroidvania Castlevania games, I haven't played Symphony of the Night just because I've seen so many speedruns of that game. I feel like if I were to do a playthrough of that game, I wouldn't really be getting the full experience of having played it for the first time, considering I've seen so many speedruns of that game. You know what I mean? So maybe that game's like way better, right? But in terms of the GBA games, even though I think they're great games, like with the action and stuff, the exploration and the secrets and stuff in those Castlevania games is nowhere near as good as Metroid.
I agree. I think the other part of Metroidvania and the part that Castlevania brings is not just the exploration, but also like the items, the magic, the setting up your character.
Yeah. That's why Castlevania. That's why the Castlevania games are still worth playing. They do other things that Metroid doesn't do, and that's why it makes up for it. The thing is, like, it's so easy to make fun of Konami, right? We need to actually give them some positive reinforcement when they do something good. In this case, releasing the Castlevania Advance Collection for like $20, which is a really good price. A lot of these companies, when they release collections of old games, how they think about it is like, oh, well, we can charge a full $60 because it comes with 3 games. So that would mean you're actually just paying $20 for each game. But it's still $60. It's still some old games compared to new games, which are $60. So I'm really glad that the Castlevania Advance Collection was just $20. So I bought that immediately to support it, right? And also I got it on Switch to show Nintendo that we want GBA games that we can purchase and own. So that's a really good collection that I got. The Castlevania Anniversary Collection on Switch is really good as well. I'm just specifically shouting out the Advanced Collection because those games are really expensive to buy physically, right? What were you saying?
Oh, nothing. We were just talking about price before.
Yeah, and we're talking about...
I think I made the point of just,
yeah,
doesn't matter how long the game is. It really doesn't.
Looking at the amount of hours you get from a purchase is one logic, right? But you have to also take into account that there's a quality aspect of those hours as well, because you can think, how many hours will I get from buying this game? But you also have to add into the equation, like, what is going to be the quality of those hours, right?
To me, if I can go through a game in like a couple of hours, and that couple of hours was just like so dense with gameplay, with action, with like just attention to like me focusing on the game to such a ridiculous degree because of like what the game is demanding of me, like that's something that like some RPGs don't really do, like, because it's just like there's some point and click, like you just click to attack things, and like I don't get anything out of that all the time for like RPGs, and that could be like 50 hours of just clicking on enemies like Diablo or Torchlight.
Hey, I'm not here to trash talk ARPGs.
I'm not either. They're good games. I'm just saying, like, for what I look for, it's definitely not length. It's dense gameplay and action-oriented gameplay.
I think we might be kind of biased in favor of short games too, though, because it's always something to heavily consider when you're switching a game on a live stream, because there's an inherent disadvantage to switching games when you're running a live stream. And so if a game is short, that means you can beat it quickly and then go back to what you usually do.
Yeah. Which
is going to be a much different perspective from someone that's just playing things just to play them, you know what I mean? Because like you've been wanting to play the Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster lately, right? But you've been busy with Metroid.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to it eventually.
I thought you were saving it for when 5 and 6 came out, so that way you could do all 3 back to back, like what you did with 1 through 3.
I'm sure that 5 will come out within the next month or 2, and 6, I don't know when. I have no idea.
Yeah. See, I don't think there's much more to say about the price. Like I said, I already knew his thoughts on that are pretty much the same as mine, but that seemed to be a big talking point. So I just wanted to bring it up. Another thing, and I guess this became a big talking point because of Kotaku writing that article. You know which article I'm talking about?
Oh yes, I know what article. I absolutely know what you're talking about.
The first 3 letters are also a bird, a flightless bird, perhaps. Yeah. So I didn't read the article because like why? But for anyone that doesn't know, Kotaku, this was like within the first couple of days of the game having released, right?
Yeah.
Kotaku published an article. I didn't read it, so I don't know what their point was, right? So I'm not going to pretend I know. But their headliner was reporting that Metroid Dread is running well on emulators. I didn't read it, so I don't know if they're actually promoting the use of emulation or if they're just making it as more of a scientific thing, because I think that actually eventually would have a place, like if people start making Dread randomizers and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, you wouldn't want to promote emulation for a game that just came out, right? Because like anybody that promotes any kind of justification for, like, if you want to have the ethical discussion about when it's justified to emulate things, I think most people would agree that if it's some old game that you can't buy anymore, emulating that is a lot more reasonable than emulating a game that just came out for a modern console, right? Like if, for example, like what's an old game that isn't released on any kind of modern console? You know what I mean?
Ooh. Well, how old are we talking? Because we could also talk about like some PS3, Xbox Live games
let's just say
never got ported.
Like, let's just say Metroid 2, like the actual. Let's say you play Samus Returns and you want to play the original, and I don't think it's on. Maybe it's on 3DS, but I don't think it is. Let's say you don't own a 3DS, right?
Okay.
Like, emulating Metroid 2 on an emulator is going to be much more justified when, like, if you buy, because even if you go out on eBay and buy a physical copy of Metroid 2 on Game Boy, Nintendo isn't getting that money,
It's not supporting Nintendo at all.
So whether you emulate or buy the game physically, that's not supporting the rights owners either way, right? So it doesn't matter. But in the case of, like a game that literally just came out, whose sales are going to be very important in determining like the fate of the franchise. It's definitely not a good look to promote emulation, especially when it's coming from a website that's supposed to be, Kotaku, a website that's supposed to be a promoter of video games in general, right?
Right.
When I say promoter, I don't mean like paid to promote games instead of reviewing them. I mean like obviously they're supposed to, be about the gaming industry, And if you start promoting all this emulation for everything and people start emulating and then the rights owners don't get the money, then they can't make the games and then you don't have things to review for your website anymore, right? So it's like inherently contrary to the website's self-interest, So people getting flustered about the article makes perfect sense, right? Maybe the actual article itself had nothing to do with that and they just made a clickbaity title, which had the opposite effect. Didn't make people click on it. People don't even read articles. They just read the title and then they make opinions about it.
Right.
So I think that the internet's response to that was definitely expected at the very least. Like, they should have expected that. Fortunately, though, even if they were trying to promote emulation, I don't think it mattered because, like we said earlier, the game did end up selling well and it's still selling well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, most people who pirate or emulate things wouldn't have paid for the thing anyway. So piracy and emulation actually has much less of an impact on industries than you would expect intuitively.
I would like to believe that it was just because of like future-proofing, like keeping the games like relevant without them like fading out of existence. That's what I would like to believe.
Maybe I should have read it before making this video. They could have definitely made an innocent article talking about something like that, or maybe they were talking about making a Dread randomizer.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that emulating Dread to play a Dread randomizer would be ethical if you've already bought a copy. Technically, it is 100% legal to emulate something if it's your own game that you already bought, right?
Yeah.
So, like, from a legal standpoint, if you bought Dread, then you are allowed to emulate that. So, like, let's say you already bought a Switch version of Dread, and you're a content creator, and then you can only do so many speedruns, right? And you start getting bored of it, and you want to start making more content, and you do, like, randomizer runs. I think that would be perfectly justified, right? Maybe that's what the article is about. Maybe it wasn't, but, like, even if they made the article about that, they should have changed the title because they should have known, as someone who writes articles for a living, that most people will just read the title and then make an opinion based on that,
That's true.
Yeah. Was there anything else I was going to talk about in terms of like a meta sense?
You said sales, price, which we already covered.
Yeah, sales, price, emulation. Those were like the meta things. And then like, talking about Prime 4 and like sequels, we kind of touched on.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk more about our speedrun experiences since we kept alluding to that.
Right.
So yeah, as a speedrun game, I really, really like it. Like Metroid Dread as a video game, I would give it like an 8 out of 10. As a Metroid game, I would probably give it a little lower, even though it's still a must-buy for Metroid fans, right? As as a speedrun game, I think it's really fun. Like, I like it as a speedrun game more than I like it as a casual playthrough. Because, you know, both of us have been liking it more and more as we spend more time with it. It's pretty rewarding to, like, memorize the map and stuff, you know, and start sequence breaking things.
Yeah, just getting good at the boss fights is fun. Getting good at the general movement, like you don't even need to do the sequence breaks, but nailing those is really good too.
What's funny is a lot of the like Easter eggy stuff and the sequence breaks that they deliberately put in there are ending up not even being optimal, right? Like they made it where if you get a morph ball bomb early before Kraid, you can get a special quick kill animation, like a cinematic finisher on him. So, you know, they programmed in that cutscene. So they obviously accounted for the fact that some people might go and get Morph Ball Bomb first, right? And then you can kill Kraid instantly. But it's actually not worth it because the amount of time it would take to go get the Morph Ball Bomb and go back to Kraid and then go back to doing whatever you need to do after that ends up being a time waste.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, tons of backtracking.
It's so funny that they deliberately put in some things for speedrunners and speedrunners aren't even using it. Because there are some sequence breaks that are like some other sequence breaks that are obviously not intentional. Because like the game's only been out for a few days, but people are finding more and more stuff every day, you know, which is natural for a game that's this new. But it's starting to show, the game is starting to show its cracks. Like this game is actually pretty broken in terms of pseudo wave beams. You can pretty much shoot through any kind of wall or floor. Like it's funny how many different ways people are finding to shoot a beam through a wall or a floor or a ceiling. It's not just one uniform method. Because there's one you have to do at the beginning, and then there's like a different version. You know the very beginning where the you have to shoot that explosive thing, and then it makes that it cuts off one path, but it opens up another.
Yeah.
You stand right underneath it to hit that blob for the first 3 times, but if you stand underneath it when you break it and the rocks fall on you, you die. So you have to do a certain pseudo wave beam for the first 3, and then you have to move to the left and do it a different way for the last hit. And then right after that, there's another one you have to do, right? And then you can skip the Drogiga boss fight with a pseudo wave beam. And now more recently, well, there was already a sequence break to get space jump early, which was extremely hard from a mechanical standpoint. I actually made a video on this already. But someone else has discovered a way to do pseudo wave beam with their diffusion beam. And as soon as you enter Farina, you're able to shoot that pink blob below you and open up a pathway to space jump, which is way faster than the other way. Yeah. So it's kind of funny how broken this game is. Even though these are things that like casual, it's not a critique of the game because casual players would not run into this at all, right? So like from a casual perspective, just playing through the game once, I don't think I encountered any bugs or anything like that.
I'm torn in a way because like I like the things that you can do that are expected. Like, you know, like they expected people to figure out some of these things that are just like out of order. But like the pseudo wave thing, like I'm torn on that because I really don't feel like that was intended at all.
Oh yeah, that definitely was not. So you're essentially clipping into the wall just enough that your shot somehow goes through it.
So there's a part of me that like would like them to patch it, but then there's also a part of me that's just like just leave it so that the speedrunners can have their fun.
I know. The thing is, it's already in there. They can't, like, no takebacks. You know what I mean? That's my philosophy when it comes to speedrun tech. No takebacks. Hey, if you didn't fix it by release date and people started having fun routing it, too late. You can't take it from them.
Yeah.
It's like you give a kid a present, right? And then, like, the next day you say, like, oh, actually, I changed my mind. I didn't want to give you that and take it away.
The only way that becomes a huge issue is if you can soft lock yourself or something. Which
I actually encountered what I thought was a soft lock, but apparently you can use that underwater bomb glitch to get out, even though I did try that. So it's once you get the space jump early, you can go get the screw attack early by doing another jank trick to space jump out of the water, which I also have a video on. I have a video showcasing the space jump early, like how to get the space jump early into how to get the screw attack early into getting gravity suit, because that's where this new strategy would reconverge with the old route. So I have a video like showing you how to go from one to the next. There's a spot once you get the screw attack where you can, I thought you could soft lock yourself because you fall in the water and you can't get out. I I tried using the water bomb glitch to get enough height to get out so I could space jump out of the water. I could never pull it off, but someone in the comments told me that you actually can get out with that glitch. So I don't know if that would technically be considered a soft lock or not, if it requires a literal glitch to escape. You know? So from a game designer standpoint, when you find yourself in that situation, it would be considered a soft lock, even though by technicality it might not be.
I think you always have to consider like what the most casual player could run into.
Yeah, but the thing is, the only reason you're getting in that situation is if you do all this other jank like speedrun tech. So a casual player will never like accidentally stumble in that situation.
It's such a weird line to walk in terms of like what you fixed and what you don't.
Whoops, I accidentally sequence broke the space jump early by shooting diffusion beam through the floor by hitting this flamethrower enemy at the exact right frame of its animation, and then I went straight to go get the screw attack early by space jumping out of the water by colliding with the geometry of this one rock's corner, and then fell in the water pit by accident. Now I'm soft locked, and even though it required an underwater bomb glitch to get there, I somehow forgot how to do it, and now I'm soft locked. Whoops.
I absolutely get what you...
So yeah, I hope they don't change it. I like how the majority of the run is mostly just clean movement and stuff like that. Something else I really like about the run is not only is it a matter of clean movement and execution and technical skill, but there's also a huge endurance element to it as well, because there's no cap on how fast you can fire the beam shot in this game. Meaning that if you can mash fast enough, that is optimal DPS over something like missile spam. So you are having to mash the life out of that button throughout the run. And it's like an hour and a half speed run, right?
Yep.
So your arm is so tired at the end of it. I've like the last time I finished a run, when I was in the middle of the run, I was planning on doing another one after it, but I didn't even feel like doing another one after it because my arm was so sore. So I like how it's a combination of endurance and technical skill. I think that makes it a bit more multifaceted. So now it's not just a matter of runners like having to get god runs in order to beat world record or something, right? Now there are multiple facets where they can improve their time, you know?
Mm-hmm. I actually love the mashing because I'm proud of my mashing ability.
Yeah, I like the mashing. I hope they don't patch that.
Just as fast as I want to fire, just let me do it. Come on.
When I saw some people doing it, kind of reminded me of a glitch you could exploit in Cuphead. In Cuphead, I think it was the lobber and the boomerang shot. You know how in Cuphead have you ever played Cuphead?
I've played co-op on Parsec.
Okay, so you know how you have two different weapons you can swap between?
Yeah.
Basically, in the launch version of Cuphead, it did get patched, but there is a separate speedrun category for the unpatched version if you want to use this glitch. Mm-hmm. It was the lobber shot and the one that like boomerangs back towards you. If you select both of those and you mash the swap weapon button while firing, you pretty much fire both of them at the same time, which does like crazy DPS, right? Buku damage. So I saw some people doing this in Dread, which reminds me of that. So while they're mashing the life out of the button to spam beam shots, they're throwing in missiles every now and then. So I think they're also tapping the R button as they're mashing to like throw in missiles. And because they're doing this all so fast, it looks like a constant stream of beam shots with missiles inside of it.
I'm gonna have to start doing that.
I tried incorporating that, but whenever I tried to tap the missile button while mashing, it would make a much bigger like space in between the missile and the beam shots than what they were doing. So I just have to get better at it, I guess.
Probably just the timing thing, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But that's another cool thing, right? Because, you know, if you add up the amount of times you have to mash in the whole run, that's so many times, right? Which means that there is potentially so much opportunity for time saves. Which means, like, the runs are going to be much more competitive with each other, which is always more exciting to me, right?
Right.
Like, you know, in Super Mario Bros. On NES, like, I think that the current world record is literally unbeatable because there's no other spot where you can optimize it. Because there are only so many things going on in that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of boring in my opinion.
Yeah, it's boring until someone discovers something, and then it's interesting
also,
again.
The aiming in Dread is a lot harder than it looks. I always feel like I have terrible aim when I'm trying to shoot an enemy with the Omega Cannon. And it started to make me think that my aim just sucked, but upon watching other speedrunners, apparently a lot of people have trouble with the aiming. And I'm not saying that the aiming's bad in the game. I just mean it's an actual skill thing, right? Because you have 360-degree aiming, so it's not just a binary, like, aim at it or not. You know, you have to actually gradually change, you know, you have to gradually move your arm cannon as the enemy's walking, right? So I think that's another indefinite level, like an undetermined level of skill that's required in a certain spot, which makes the runs more exciting because it's just like more spots to mess up, you know?
Yeah.
The run.
I love the shine sparking. The shine sparking is just so fun in this game.
Yeah, the thing is, I honestly, the games I like speedrunning are the games that were actually designed with speedrunning in mind. Like, I speed ran. Does anybody know if the past tense is speed ran or speed runned or sped runned or sped ran or sped run? There are a lot of different options.
I don't know which one I'd pick. I'd probably say speed run. I don't know.
See, speed run sounds stupid, but to anybody saying that, I would propose the counterpoint of hung versus hanged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hanged sounds like a grammatical error version, like a grammatically incorrect version of hung, but it means a different thing, right? And speed run is its own word, which means speed runned could be a thing and not speed ran. Anyways, like Mega Man 11, I know you dabbled with speedrunning that game too, right? That game literally had leaderboards built in for specific levels, you know? So they obviously designed that game with time in mind, you know? So I liked speedrunning that game. I liked speedrunning Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which is a racing game, so obviously, like, the goal in that game is to go fast, you know? Especially when they added the developer ghost times. That was really fun. And then Demon Turf, which just recently got its release date officially announced, November 4th. There's actually another speedrun contest for that game going on right now. 3 different categories. If you win, I think it was like, it's not just the top winner. It's like top 5 or top 3 or something. But there is a contest going on right now for the demo. You win Steam keys. That's why I'm not competing in this one, because I already have a review copy. So, and like, yeah. I wouldn't want to take a Steam key from someone. Like, I wouldn't want to get a Steam key if there are other people competing that actually want a copy of the game that don't have it, right? But there is a contest going on right now for the demo that's out right now, and then also next week's trial and the trial after that. So anyways, my point is with Demon Turf, the developer was really in touch with the speedrunners, right? And definitely built that game with speedrunning in mind, right? He even like ran stuff himself just to test to see how things would be. You know, even though the hardcore speedrunners obviously, you know, beat his times by a lot, because, you know, obviously he's busy making the game.
Yeah, of course.
My point is he is very much aware of speedrunning culture in general, right? So he wouldn't want to like patch things out or anything like that if it's fun tech. And then with this game, I mean, Metroid games, they literally give you a time at the end when you beat it, right? And in this game's case specifically, in Metroid Dread's case, they even give you more pieces of artwork to look at that you unlock if you beat the game under a certain amount of time, you know? So they this is also definitely a game that was made with speed in mind, you know? So I always find myself gravitating towards speedrunning games that were built with speedrunning in mind, right? And you kind of do the same thing, right? Because
yeah, the games that I've been drawn to have that quality for sure.
Yeah, because the example I always think of as like the opposite end of the spectrum is Darksiders just Darksiders 1. Have you ever watched a speedrun of Darksiders 1?
No, I've only ever seen
that game is broken beyond belief when you crack it open. So literally, like the whole entirety of that game's speedrun entails performing this frame-perfect glitch in the air over and over. It's this frame-perfect trick that you have to perform over and over in the air, which essentially lets you fly around wherever you want. And so the whole run entails flying around out of bounds using this frame-perfect trick, just flying over to one trigger zone to the next. Like, from one trigger zone to the next to trigger certain events, right?
Sounds exactly like that glitch in Sonic Boom with Knuckles to just constantly jump in the air over and over again.
That game's probably broken beyond belief, even from people don't like that game, right? Boom.
No, not really.
I heard that game was really buggy, even from a casual perspective. So, like, if that game's buggy in a normal playthrough, you know, speedrunners are going to break that B open.
So Darksiders is just as buggy?
No, the Darksiders 1 casual playthrough, that's one of my favorite games ever to play casually. Okay. Like, a first playthrough of that game, that's one of my favorite games ever. I didn't know about how broken that game was until after I started looking into the speedrun tech. And again, it's literally a frame-perfect trick that you have to perform multiple times in a row, right, to fly around. So no one is going to accidentally run into that. Yeah, it's a pretty solid game. Like, just as just casually playing the game, what I use is guard canceling to, like, animation cancel my attacks to do, like, really high DPS on enemies and stuff, which I guess you could consider to be a speedrun tech. I also use, like, movement tech to, like, there's a gun you get in the game, and you can, like, use the lock-on and, like, side dashes in a certain way to kind of fly around fast, like, just to dash around faster than you normally are allowed to. I like using, like, a minor level of speedrun tech in that game just to kind of kill enemies faster and move around quicker, just for fun, but I definitely wouldn't want to speedrun that game for real, because I don't just want to fly around out of bounds, you know?
See, that's the thing, right? Is sometimes you want to play a game well and go fast, but you don't necessarily need to be the fastest. It's just how you enjoy your games sometimes, is like that general feeling of it's built well enough that you can go fast if you want to.
It's like I want the developers to put limitations on me so I can fight them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if those limitations are so poorly held together that I can clip out of bounds anywhere, it's like, it's not as fun in my opinion. It's like, I would rather be put in an obstacle course that I can't easily escape from, so to speak.
Right.
You know, because I like the challenge aspect of it, you know. Not saying that one speedrun is more or less competitive than the other, you know. It's obviously all just as competitive. I'm just talking about in terms of, like, why something's fun.
Of course.
Anything else you want to talk about? We talked about the, you know, like, just reviewing the game as a product, you know, from a, you know, for a casual player, or, like, just from a one-time playthrough perspective. And then a significant portion, we talked about the story, obviously, and then more meta stuff like sales, the price, emulation, and we just talked about speedrunning. Is there anything else you want to talk about, like, related to Metroid Dread at all, since this is kind of turning into, like, a mega discussion kind of video?
I just hope that we get another one within the next few years. I don't want to wait a really long time for another 2D Metroid.
I really like it when franchises have significant breathers in between the games. Like, I'm not advocating for another 19-year gap or anything like that. But when I see what happens to franchises like Assassin's Creed, for example, where they turn into yearly releases and then they start just turning into when something gets a yearly release, it seems as if the developers start to get fatigued, right? And then they all become kind of samey. And then they're not as special when they release, right? Yeah. Like, Devil May Cry, I think, is a good example of, like, having just one. I think Devil May Cry is a franchise that is perfectly fine with having one release per console generation, right? Like, PS3 era had DMC4. PS4 era had DMC5. I don't think DMC6 should be a thing until, well, I guess PS5 is a thing, so I guess PS5 during the PS5 is Gen 9, right? I guess during Gen 9, that's when DMC6 would be a thing. Anyways, my point is, like, that's the kind of, because players, like, combo matters and stuff will, like, spend so much time in each of those games, I think it's good to have just, like, one game per console generation like that, because it forces the developers to make, like, a really good quality thing. You know what I mean?
100% agreed. Absolutely.
So, like, I don't think or even want the next mainline Metroid game. I don't think it'll come out within the next 5 years, nor do I the reason I'm saying this is because of Prime 4, right?
Right.
So, like, Prime 4 is probably, next year's a little hopeful. It'll probably be the year after next year. I'm thinking Prime 4 is going to be a 2023 thing. You know, so Prime 4 is going to be a big deal for a while, right? And then I wouldn't want the new Metroid game to come out, like, the next year right after Prime 4, you know?
Right. when I say a couple of years, I really mean like I don't want to wait another 19 years. Like
Yeah,
you said.
like maybe a decade and over is a little too long.
Like when
Just
are we
a
gonna get a
little.
new F-Zero? Like, come
Dude,
on.
don't even remind me about it. Our day will eventually come.
One day.
It's bound to happen eventually. Man, like F-Zero eventually has to have the same kind of comeback that Dread had, right? That Metroid had. The issue is that the thing is, I remember reading an article during the Wii U era. Someone was asking Miyamoto if F-Zero was ever coming back. And he said the reason why he hasn't done anything with F-Zero is because he can't think of a way to, like, innovate with it. Essentially, Miyamoto loves making games around a gimmick, right? Because this was around the same time he did Star Fox. He was referencing Star Fox Zero on the Wii U, saying the only reason he made that game was because he thought of the gimmick with the gamepad.
Right.
But
they had trouble coming up with even that.
The thing is, though, F-Zero GX was so long ago. You don't need to innovate on it. You can just copy the same formula, but make like a battle royale mode where like each lap the person in last gets eliminated. That would be so cool with F-Zero.
That would be a great mode.
I know, like imagine like a giant like Big Blue type racetrack with like 50 racers, right? And each lap the person in last just explodes. And then eventually it comes down to like the last two people. That would be so cool. It's not even.
Plus it would also have people knocking each other off the stage.
Yeah. Like obviously you can like, you know, blow up by normal means as well. But like imagine that the two racers are like so good, you know, that they're just evading exploding each time. You have to thin it out by making the person in last blow up. It's just like, my point is you don't even have to put that much thought into thinking up a really cool F-Zero game that would sell well. You know?
You definitely don't. That's awesome. I want that. Can they make that? Can Nintendo hear this and then just make that happen?
The thing is, like, Metroid Dread was made by Mercury Steam, and Prime 4 is being made by Retro Studios. Meaning, even by the year 2023 or 2024 or whenever when Prime 4 releases, Nintendo will have not actually made a Metroid game in so long. They didn't make Other M, Team Ninja made Other M. So, what was the last Metroid game Nintendo made? Fusion, right? Because Primes came out, and Primes are Retro Studios. Other M was Team Ninja. So that means, like, by the year 2023 or 2024, the last Metroid game Nintendo had made was 2002. Which will have been over 20 years. Which makes me think, like, maybe they don't know what to do with Metroid either, which is why they keep outsourcing it to other people. Which means maybe there's hope for F-Zero, because maybe they would outsource F-Zero, right? F-Zero GX was outsourced to Sega. I don't know why they don't just do that again.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say that. Yeah, eventually they'll do that. They could even outsource it to the people. What's the game on Switch that it's like Fast RMX or something?
It was Fast Racing Neo on Wii U, and they ported it to Switch with some extra stuff, and they just called it Fast RMX.
And it's pretty good.
Yeah, I really like that game. It is fundamentally different than F-Zero, though. They feel completely different.
Yeah, but it's the same sensation of like going fast in like a futuristic car is what I mean.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, like, on the YouTube videos for it and everything, everyone was saying, like, why not just give them the F-Zero IP and let them go to town with it?
I still prefer F-Zero, like, way more gameplay-wise compared to that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The thing is, F-Zero has such a unique feel to it. It's so weird that nothing has filled that vacuum in all these years. It'll eventually happen. I was getting excited for F-Zero X Online with the Nintendo Online thing, but now I'm not so excited knowing that it's going to be $80.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not paying for that.
It depends on. I don't want to pay for that. I wouldn't do that individually, but I'm on like a family plan with my friends, so like I'm not sure what they're gonna do.
I mean, it's probably more convenient if you actually know people in real life that also play the Switch, right? I don't know a single other person that would want to get on a Nintendo Online subscription with me in real life, right? So it would just be me. And like, I do not want to pay $80 to play a handful of old N64 games that I already own on my Wii U from having bought them on the Virtual Console for like $6 each or however much they were.
Mm-hmm. Is it $80? Hold on a minute.
Yeah. You might have seen
That's
you might
crazy.
have seen the $50 price point float around, and that's just because it's $50 more than the normal price. But I don't even pay for a Nintendo Online subscription at all, so it's not a $50 price increase to me. To me, it would be the whole $80.
Uh-huh.
You can go ahead and double check me though, because I don't want to spread misinformation.
Well, hold on a second. It's not that I don't believe you. I'm just like, that's a crazy amount of money.
Nintendo is they have to eventually realize what they're doing wrong with that, right? They eventually have to see it.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll look into this later because I'm seeing a lot of numbers being thrown around on some of these.
I mean, just look up their trailer. They have a trailer on YouTube that has a whole bunch of dislikes.
Okay, let me see. Combing through.
Do you see that picture on Twitter I posted the other day? Like, I just found some, like, utopian city. I said, society if the Nintendo Switch had the Wii's Virtual Console from 2007.
Yeah.
That would fix all of our problems. We'd be living in the future if we had the Virtual Console from literally the year 2007.
All right, is this the pricing? Oh, wait, no, it changed. Hang on.
Look at it in the actual video.
Oh no, this is from the video. That's one screen grab, and then I have this one.
Switch
$80
Online
$80
expansion pack. Expansion pack's what they actually call it. Nintendo 17% like ratio. That is absolutely terrible. I like to see it. I love to see it. Thank you, consumers, for not blindly giving Nintendo more of your money.
Okay, so the individual membership for the expansion is $50, but for the family one,
okay, that's where I was seeing the 80. Okay, so yeah, I don't want to spread misinformation or anything. So like, if I by myself wanted to pay for a year, it would have been 50, which is still too much.
It's a lot.
And then the family plan would be $80 if you can somehow find another person in real life that would want to play Switch Online with you.
The $50 would only be justified if you actively play games online. Like, not even just the ones that they give you with the Switch Online, but like, Smash Brothers, Splatoon, Animal Crossing. And then if you play those other games that they give you too, then yeah, that would make sense for $50.
There's no if they want to charge like a legit premium price, then they literally should just open up the vault doors to the entire Virtual Console that was on Wii and Wii U. Then it would be a bit more justifiable, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like they're building.
Okay, this could easily turn into a rant video about Nintendo Online. I'd like to keep it on topic with Metroid Dread.
About Metroid Dread, weren't we?
Yeah. Well, we were saying Metroid Dread, and it's like, oh, I hope F-Zero comes back too. And then I was talking about F-Zero X with the Switch Online. Mm-hmm. Okay, so any other points or topics before I wrap up the video?
I don't think so. I think we covered mostly everything.
I'm really glad Metroid Dread sold well, right? Even though I have a lot of critiques about it, I still think it's a must-play, and I'm having a lot of fun speedrunning the game. I'm probably going to keep speedrunning the game until Demon Turf comes out, and then I will probably put my focus on that game, considering I'm already super invested in that game, from doing the contests and stuff, and being more involved with like the speedrun community of that game, because even though I've been speedrunning Metroid Dread, like the only person I've really been talking to about it is Geo right here, right?
And I'm mostly just casually speedrunning it, but I still want to like get better at it and learn the tricks and such. But you've already jumped on the tricks more than I have so far.
Yeah. It's kind of funny learning all these tricks this early, right? Because literally some of these things might be obsolete later. Like, for example, getting Space Jump and Screw Attack early makes you skip the Z57 boss fight. Mm-hmm. So any amount of time you spent practicing that boss fight and getting the Shine Spark kill at the end is pointless now. And again, the first sequence break to get Space Jump early is really hard. And it took me almost an hour to successfully pull it off for the first time. And I was so proud of myself when I finally got it. And then literally a few hours after that, someone discovered a different way to get it. So like if you don't actually enjoy the act of doing this kind of stuff, it might be kind of annoying when stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. The world record right now is like 120 something. But like generally, the speedrunners that have been playing it like 24/7 since the game came out are getting like an hour, 30-minute runs around that. Someone in the Demon Turf Discord, one of the other runners, who's been doing it since the start, sort of like did like a speed walking to steal your terminology, like a speed walking playthrough of the game to kind of like estimate how long an any percent run of the game would be. And he's estimating it'll be like around 3 hours, which sounds crazy to me because like speedrunning Metroid Dread with that being an hour and a half long run, that feels like a really long speed run to me.
Yeah, and people speedrun games that are way longer than that.
Yeah, so like if I switch from Dread to a game that takes 3 hours to speedrun, that'll be even crazier, right? Like, on one hand, that means it won't be very reset heavy, because if you're like more than an hour in, you definitely don't want to reset that on a minor mistake. So it'll be less pressure, but on the other hand, it means no matter what your run is, it's going to have some slop in it.
Yeah. Well, over time, a lot of that slop could also go away, because it'll just be so burned into your muscle memory, I feel like.
That is true in any kind of run, but it's less true when it comes to, like, it's less true as a run gets longer, you know, because you're going to be less inclined to reset if you're already super far into a run, you know?
Yeah.
And then routing that thing is going to be a monster. I'm really curious to see where Metroid Dread eventually lands in terms of its any percent length once we kind of reach an equilibrium, right? Because literally, like, some new skips might have been discovered since the start of us recording this video, like as we speak. Someone might have discovered some big skip.
I saw a speedrunner, not speed running, but practicing this weird thing with the morph ball, where you could set the morph ball state in a specific location and then warp back to that location later.
Huh, it's kind of weird. Like kind of like what would I call that? Not really a save state. But
almost.
Like, yeah.
Because they were trying to, I forget in which area, but they were trying to get through an ice area, but they were not confident that they were going to be able to make it through the whole thing. So they decided to set their state there and warp back when they had like full health or something later, so they could get through the rest of it to skip
wow.
this area.
Okay, I'm going to have to look that up. I'm going to have to look that up after we finish recording.
I don't think there was any time save, at least when they were experimenting, but it was just like, what? If this is what they're practicing with right now.
And my experience, like, the one thing I will never underestimate about people in general is how innovative they can get, especially when it comes to competitiveness and self-interest, right? Mm-hmm. So I would not be surprised at all if the Metroid Dread any percent goes down to under an hour.
I wouldn't either. It'll happen.
Like, it's potentially just one skip away from going down to under an hour, you know, at any given time.
It's going to happen.
Which will be funny, because, like, everyone was thinking about how it's going to be significantly longer than normal Metroid speedruns when it first came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, though, I think a lot of people remember Metroid games being shorter than they are, though. Because once you've beaten it once, and you know where to go, replaying the game, even casually, is kind of fast. Because, again, you know where to go, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, if you look up on how long to beat, you know, that website, I think old games on how long to beat are going to be very misrepresented in terms of their length. I think on how long to beat, on average, any kind of old game is going to have their time listed as shorter than it really is for a first playthrough. Because most people playing the game again and putting the time on how long to beat are people that probably beat the game before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Metroid Dread, a lot of people were acting like it was longer for a first playthrough than normal compared to Metroid games. Even though I think it's just because they forgot how long their first playthrough of other Metroid games were, because it's been so long.
Yeah, I agree. When I was playing Super Metroid the other day, like, I was getting lost, and it took me like maybe 4 or 5-ish hours to beat.
Yeah.
So while Dread is longer,
I think the flow of the level design in Dread pretty much always pushes you in the direction you're supposed to go. Like, once I started playing the game for a few hours and I got a sense of how the level design in that game is, I pretty much always knew, like, the direction I was supposed to go. Even though I got stuck a couple of times in the game, I knew where I was supposed to be, right? Like, I knew like, the general area I was supposed to be in, so I knew where I should be looking for something I was missing at the time. Whereas I remember getting lost a lot harder in other Metroid games, but maybe it was just because I was younger.
It could be that. I've heard most people that I've talked to getting pretty lost right after getting the speed booster in Dread. For some reason,
that's weird because when you get the speed booster in that game, the game really opens up.
No, yeah, and that's why people get lost. Is because
because it's just it's less linear after that.
Older areas, but if you pay attention, there's clear speed booster walls that just lead you to the next area. That you have
pretty
to go.
much in Dread, as soon as you get an item, like there's a spot to use the item right beside where you just got it, and then it's like a trail of breadcrumbs back to where you're supposed to go. You know,
it's well designed.
Yeah,
but I think the thing about it is that the world is really big, so that it's hard to.
I saw some people
landmarks and figure out how to get back to them sometimes.
I saw some people critiquing how the information on the map was displayed in the pause menu as well, because, like, for example, when you get an item, it doesn't go away. It just sort of lowers in opacity, which can get kind of cluttered.
I think that was me.
Maybe it was you, but I saw other people complaining about it too, which I thought was definitely a legitimate critique, even though I never felt bothered by it too much, but I can definitely agree with that. So maybe if this is some people's first rodeo with this kind of game, maybe it would be really confusing and jarring for them looking at the map, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot to look at in the bigger areas.
Yeah. Anything else? I know I asked this already, and then it led to another point.
No, it's all good. I don't think there's anything else. I just really enjoy Metroid Dread. I know that you don't think it's as good as like a Metroidvania as some other games, but I
think it's a great game. I think my expectations for a Metroid game are so extremely high that it makes it kind of an unfair criteria. You know what I mean? But like as a speedrun game, I really like it. And of course, like I said, it's like, even though I have critiques about the game, I'm not trying to de-incentivize anyone from buying the game because it's totally worth the money, you know? And it's been so long since a Metroid game came out, you know, it's totally worth the experience, you know, and, you know, just the fact of owning it, you know, because it's it's really weird because I always consider Metroid, Zelda, and Mario as Nintendo's big three, right? Nintendo doesn't really ever seem to consider Metroid as something that competes with. I know it doesn't sell as well as Mario or Zelda, but I'm just talking in terms of like brand power and naming recognition, you know? It doesn't seem as if Nintendo ever considers Metroid to stand alongside Zelda or Mario, which is weird. Because they've always had the resources to market Metroid harder if they wanted to make it more of a thing like Zelda or Mario.
It could just be like, you know, sci-fi is sometimes kind of niche. Like,
the reason why I think it's balanced is because Zelda is like their medieval fantasy thing. Metroid is their sci-fi thing, and then Mario is like their whatever, I don't even know what you would call that, some kind of psychedelic version of fantasy stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just weird that sci-fi, like I always think of like high fantasy and sci-fi as like the two monoliths of fictional universe archetypes, you know what I mean? Like if you were to make any kind of fictional universe, like the first question would be, should I make it high fantasy or should I make it sci-fi, right? Like just in broad terms.
Right.
So I find it weird how much more popular Zelda has always been. I'm guessing it's just because the kind of like level design and progression system in Metroid appeals to much more of like a hardcore kind of gamer than something as open and sandboxy as Zelda.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. And the thing with Zelda is with Zelda, it's much more like puzzle focused, and people really like to figure out puzzles. But with Metroid, it's not really as much puzzle as it is just like finding the right way.
I think it's kind of an interesting argument to say Metroid is or isn't a puzzle game, because if you think about it, like the whole map as a whole, it's kind of like one big puzzle.
Yeah,
Like a
for sure.
maze. It's more like a maze, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking about which abilities to get in which order, like in the abstract.
And while Zelda is a maze also in ways like every dungeon or like the overworld could be a maze, it just feels like a different focus sometimes. Like it's much more focused on solving these micro puzzles
Yeah,
all
like
over the
in
place.
Zelda's case, the puzzles are much more like on a micro level, right? Like you literally have a self-contained puzzle right in front of your face in a dungeon.
Yeah.
That doesn't affect anything outside of it, you know? Whereas like everything in Metroid's interconnected and you have to kind of keep track of where you've been and stuff.
Yeah, like once you go to like say in Ocarina of Time, you go to Great Jabu Jabu's belly. You don't really have to go back there again once you acquire some other item. Like it's done for
Yeah.
the most part.
Yeah, it's not as much backtracking unless you're counting like stuff in Ocarina of Time where you have to like do things in the future.
Yeah. So maybe different Zelda game example would have been better, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I'm really curious to see if Nintendo starts brandishing Metroid as like one of the big three now alongside Mario and Zelda. Because they actually did put a strangely high amount of effort into marketing this game compared to the last games. Like there were actual ads for this game. I can't remember seeing any ads for any Metroid game before this. And I never saw one for myself, but I saw on Twitter a lot of people were taking pictures of like posters and banners like in cities and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on if you compare like the amount of sales between each of those franchises to see like how they match up with each other. Because like obviously Mario is
Metroid. What's strange is Metroid has historically had a bigger has had bigger sales in the West than in Japan.
Right.
I don't know why that is. I would maybe theorize it's because you shoot things. Like in Metroid Prime's case, it's pretty easy to theorize, right? Because FPS games don't sell very well in Japan. And even though the game is very different from a traditional FPS, maybe just looking at a trailer or something, it would be hard to tell that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to see why the Prime games would have released like or would have sold better in the West. But in terms of the mainline Metroid games, the only thing I can think of is maybe just because of the shooting. But like Mega Man games sell fine in Japan, and that's all about like shooting platforming as well. It's weird. I would assume like a character in power armor with an arm cannon would be the most marketable character ever.
Yeah, I could for Japan, like all the things that they have that are similar to that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And like I just said, it sold historically it sold better in the West than in Japan. So, you know, in the West, it's also really easy to market a suit of power armor with an arm cannon. You know, like people always like make fan art of Samus alongside Doom Guy and Master Chief a lot, you know?
I think even more so after this game, the ending where she got so angry.
Yeah.
They're going to be pairing them together all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of archetype of just a character in power armor, that's super marketable. So I think Nintendo has just been sleeping on the marketability of it, right? And it seems like they're sort of starting to realize its marketability in terms of, you know, the amount of budget they obviously put into marketing this game this time.
I hope so, because I would like them to focus more on it. And even if we don't get one, even if we don't get multiple every generation of console, like at least it'll just be Metroid coming out every once in a while.
I would think one per console generation's good, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, technically two, because then you're gonna get your main line and then your Prime.
Well, I don't think they're thinking of Prime as something that's going to be ongoing after 4.
Okay.
Because they already had Retro Studios working on something else. So if you remember, they had Bandai Namco working on Prime 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't like what Bamco was making, and so they kicked out Bamco, rebooted the whole game, and then brought in Retro Studios. Meaning that Retro Studios was working on something else at that time. Meaning they had to put whatever they were working on ice. So it's just on hiatus right now while they're doing Prime 4. So I think they're going to move straight back to that after Prime 4. I think Nintendo sees Retro Studios as a much more versatile company than just Prime. You know?
True. They did Donkey
Yeah,
Kong.
they did the Donkey Kong games, and then they were working on. Remember that leak that was It was a logo. It was like Star Fox Racing something, and
I heard about that.
people were assuming that was somehow related to what Retro Studios was working on, and everyone's natural question was, why would they make a Star Fox Racing game when they have F-Zero? If they wanted to make a sci-fi futuristic racing game, why not make F-Zero, right?
Mm-hmm.
My big brain theory was that they were actually, it was actually some kind of F-Zero game that was a crossover with Star Fox to market the game more easily, since Star Fox is more of a household name than F-Zero. Because if you remember, James McCloud is in F-Zero, which is probably an Easter egg, but it could potentially be retconned as an actual confirmation that they're in the same universe.
And then in Star Fox Command, there's an ending which makes it seem like Fox and Falco turn into F-Zero racers.
Are you serious?
It's like a joke. It's like a weird ending. That game has so many weird endings.
Like, my point is, I don't think that logo was the logo for a game. I think that logo might have been like a logo for a game mode inside of a game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe they were making or maybe they were making a Star Fox game and there was like a racing mini game mode in it. You know what I mean? Because that logo just released, like, that got leaked by itself. It wasn't like on box art or anything.
Yeah.
So anyways, my point is, I think they're going to start using Retro Studios for other things, right? I think in a perfect world, Prime 4 will come out when there's like an actual Switch Pro or something. And then the next 2D Metroid would come out on their next main console, right?
Mm-hmm. That sounds fair.
Like, if they start considering Metroid as like a big thing with Mario and Zelda, then maybe they would want a Mario game, a Zelda game, and a Metroid game to come out around their next console's launch. Kind of like how they had Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild come out at the launch of the Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like Nintendo knows that their first-party titles is what sells their consoles, right? So if they can immediately have like the triple lineup like that for their next console, that'll immediately put them in a pretty good spot.
To start the generation?
Yeah, like their next console. Not Switch, not Switch Pro, not Switch Pro, but like an actual next console.
Yeah, but you still have to intersperse like other things throughout the life cycle too. So like you'll get your Kirby like somewhere in the middle, probably like a couple of little spin-off Kirby games or something.
Yeah.
Whatever other games that they have. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, they usually make more than one Mario game per console generation. So if you make a Mario game at a console's launch, you have enough time to make another Mario game. Which, now that I mention it, it's kind of weird. Now that I mention it, it's kind of weird we haven't gotten another Mario game announced for Switch yet.
It's probably because of Mario 3D World they re-released it.
Yeah. I think that's fine, though, because there was actually a significant gap in between Mario releases before Odyssey came out, and then everyone loved Odyssey, right? Odyssey's great. So again, that also is a good example of why I like it when big franchises have a breather in between their releases. So then the developers can, get creatively recharged and then put more effort on actually making a quality product that will have to stay as the newest version of the franchise for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
I get you.
Anything else? Video is almost, even though I said there's no way this video will be 3 hours, it's actually almost 3 hours.
Well, things always come up. Like, other things always come up. So, no, I think we're all good.
Yeah. I think ending the video talking about like speculation on the future is kind of poetic anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let everyone know where they can find you. I probably should have said that at the beginning because that's when most people would be watching. Who the heck is watching the video this late into it? If you're listening to this, what are you doing here?
Who's that weird guy talking to Suzuki?
I'll put your links in the description in the comments as well, obviously, too. So people aren't just hearing your plugs at the end of the video, but might as well say it just, for good form.
It's all good. I'm Geo the Hero. You could find me at Geo the Hero Live at Twitch or on Twitch. and also on YouTube. And you could also find me probably with that on Twitter as well. But I also go by George Rotkamp. So
His name is Geo, and he has not watched the Mega Man Star Force anime. Can you believe that?
I know.
And now Kiss Anime's down, so now you really can't watch it because there's no place to watch it.
I haven't even played the game, and a lot of people crap on it, but I gotta play it one day.
What? No, the game's great. Don't listen to them. The last time we did a collab was it just? I think the only time we've actually collabed with each other is Streets of Rage stuff, right? Between the Streets of Rage video and then also just streaming with each other. Is that it?
Streaming. I think so.
That's weird that this is the first discussion video then.
It's just hard to plan it, the time for it. Like, we already had trouble like getting the time to work for this one. I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna have a short stream. Let's talk. Let's just freaking go for it.
Don't worry. This monolith of a 3-hour video that I'm sure everyone on YouTube will click on and watch all the way through will totally be worth ending your stream early. Don't worry, it'll be worth it. Just wait till the views start rolling in.
It's fine.
Okay,
I had a good time.
Thanks for coming on here. Thanks for spending so much time talking about the game. Again, I really wanted to talk about it with someone because with all the different reviews, you know, it's a big release. So there were tons of reviews and stuff. So I didn't just want to be another drop in the bucket of reviews. I kind of wanted to do something different, you know, and a discussion video definitely felt more fitting because of all the different aspects about the game we could talk about. So thanks again for coming on here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And everyone watching, thanks for watching. And I will see you all later. So bye for now.